Hey, welcome back everyone to the Black Brain Trust. This is episode 141, Black Tech Talk, Black Inventions in Black History. I am facilitating this one tonight. There's a docket in the description beneath the video. Please hit the like button as you come in. I'll give it 90 seconds before we get started and wait for people to come in. Also, I mentioned last night, before last night's hangout ended, that I am offering free one-on-one mentorship for IT, information technology. Give guidance on which direction you should go into, which certifications you should get, how to negotiate a salary, so on and so forth. So if anybody wants it, by all means, I am available. All you gotta do is drop your email in the chat or hit me up at the Brain Trust, as well as shoot me a message either either through the chat or through Slack or something to that effect. I have all my credentials are there, so I'll give it another 30 seconds. Hey, what's going on, Nate? Would you like to get on the Hangout, or is that for free one-on-one mentorship? Yeah, okay, we can do that. I'll send you an email after the show, and we can set something up. All right, let me give it another 30 seconds before we get started. What part of IT do you work in, Nate? All right, let me get started. Share my screen. All right, we'll get started. All right, so first one on the docket is Benjamin Montgomery. All right, so Benjamin Montgomery was born into slavery in 1819 in Loudoun County, Virginia. He was sold to Joseph E. Davis, a Mississippi planter. Davis was the older brother of Jefferson Davis, who would later serve as the President of the Confederate States of America. After a period of time, Davis could see great talent within Montgomery and assigned to him the responsibility of running his general store on the Davis Bend plantation. Montgomery, who by this time had learned to read and write, he was taught by the Davis children, excelled at running the store and served both white customers and slaves who could trade poultry and other items in return for dry goods. Impressed with his knowledge and the ability to run the store, Davis placed Montgomery in charge of overseeing the entirety of his purchasing and shipping operations on the plantation. In addition to being able to read and write, Montgomery also learned a number of difficult tasks, including land surveying techniques for flood control and the drafting of architectural plans. He was also a skilled mechanic and a born inventor. At the time, at the time, commerce often flowed through the rivers connecting country, connecting counties and states. With differences in the depth of water in different spots throughout the river, navigation could become difficult. If a steamboat were to run adrift, the merchandise would be delayed for days, if not weeks. Montgomery decided to address the problem and created a propeller that could cut into the water at different angles, thus allowing the boat to navigate more easily through shallow water. Joseph Davis attempted to patent the device, but the patent was denied on June 10th, 1858, on the basis that Ben, as a slave, was not a citizen of the United States, and thus could not apply for a patent and could not apply for a patent in his name. Later, both Joseph and Jefferson Davis attempted to patent the device in their names, but were denied because they were not the quote true inventor. Ironically, when Jefferson Davis later assumed the presidency of the Confederacy, he signed into law the legislation that would allow slaves to receive patent protection for their inventions. On June 28th, 1864, Montgomery, no longer a slave, filed a patent application for his device, but the patent office again rejected his application. Upon the end of the Civil War, Joseph Davis sold his plantation as well as other properties to Montgomery, along with his son Isaiah. The sale was the sale was made based on a long-term loan in the amount of $300,000. Benjamin and Isaiah decided to pursue a dream of using property to establish a community of freed slaves. But the natural disasters decimated their crops, leaving them unable to pay off the loan. The Davis Bend property reverted back to the Davis family, and Benjamin died the following year. Undeterred, Isaiah took up his father's dream and later purchased 840 acres of land, and along with a number of other former slaves, and founded the town of Mount Bayou, Mount Bayou, Mississippi, in 1867. 1887. Isaiah was named the town first mayor soon thereafter. While Benjamin Montgomery's stories sound sad and telling, it served as a lesson to whites and blacks in the Civil War period, demonstrating the power of education and the ability for blacks to contribute to commerce and industry. in the American South. Now, what I find interesting, well, the invention that he came up with was the rotational propeller for steamboats, which is very interesting because steamboats usually um, use a different mechanism for moving water, and it does take a lot of skill to actually create something like this. So, hats off to this guy. He's definitely at the top of the list of innovators. These, what we call geeks today. That's what these brothers were back then. So, all right, this next one is Thomas Mensa. Thomas Mensa was born in Kumasi, Ghana, in 1950. His father, J.K. Mansi, or Mensa, was a businessman who shipped the cocoa products to chocolate manufacturers in France. Thomas was an exceptionally bright child, learning to read newspapers at an early age, becoming fluent in French. As a child, he often conversed in French with his father's business associates. He went on twice to win national competition in France in 1968 and 1970. Thomas received his early education as an exclusive additional college boys school in Cape Coast. An excellent student, particularly in science and math, he received a scholarship to study chemical engineering at the University of Science and Technology in Kumasi, Ghana. An honor student, he graduated in 1974 and was awarded a fellowship from the French government to study chemical engineering at the University of Science and Technology in Montpellier, Montpellier, France. While TL part in the program and received in chemical process university from USTL and PhD. In 1980, Thomas traveled to the United States where he took a job with Air Product and Chemicals in Allentown, Pennsylvania. He was a research engineer in the chemical group division. One of the projects he one of the projects was to observe the mixing process in the polyvinyl alcohol process improvement division. The process included injecting PVAC, a polymer having a high resistance to flow, with the catalyst. Inside a thin film reactor, which used a moving blade system, the resulting mixture would end up on a moving belt where it would cure into a white slab on a polyvinyl alcohol, later cut into small pieces. A problem occurred when the mixture was of poor quality as the resultant polyvinyl um, acetate did not cure properly, resulting in unusable product and often causing a shutdown of the manufacturing process. Mensa, after long research and an innovative use of high-tech video equipment, was able to determine when the centers of the vortices during the mixture process often trap poorly mixed reactants, allowing them to proceed on to the moving belt. Thomas solved this by altering the blade configuration in the mixing process well as the as well as altering the notch depth. The redesign of the high-speed thin film industrial mixers produced a much purer blend. thus improving the efficiency of the process and diminishing the delays, which often shut down the manufacturing plant. He was awarded a winning second prize in prestigious research competition. In 1983, he joined Corning Glass Works in Corning, New York, as an engineer. He was brought he was brought on to help solve efficiency problems in the Corning fiber optic manufacturing process. Fiber optic refers to the design and application of optical fiber. Optical fibers refer to the glass or plastic fiber through which light travels, usually carrying information. Fiber optics wires are more efficient conductors of communication material than metal wire. Unfortunately, at the time, it was difficult to increase the production of fiber optical material because of the delicate glass fibers would break easily if the production speed was increased. Thus, in in drawing and encoding phase, the process was limited to producing only 2 meters per second on fiber optic stand. Mensa saw that during the coating phase, bubbles were being trapped on the coating surface dur- during the curing process. This caused inefficient losses of data. Using his knowledge of boundary layer theory, he solved this problem by injecting carbon dioxide gas near the boundary layer during the high-speed coating process. This eliminated the bubbles from forming. He also was able to increase the strength of the glass, allowing the manufacturing process to increase to 20 feet per second, a tenfold improvement. He was awarded patents for each of these improvements, along with the two other patents for additional work. In 1986, Thomas moved on to AT&T Bell Laboratories in Georgia. At Bell, he focused his attention on creating missile systems which utilize fiber optics for their guidance systems. In these systems, a small camera in the nose of the missile delivered images of a target through the fiber optic wires to the pilot, who who could then lock onto a target and hit them with extreme accuracy and precision. Dr. Mensa and his colleagues developed missiles that could use their fiber optic technology while traveling at Mach 1, the speed of sound. In addition to his work with fiber optics, Mensa found success in other areas of science. He was He has created superconductors for space communication, designed a system for creating solid-state rechargeable cell phone batteries, developed new filament wound composite structures to be used to provide a light replacement for tank gun barrels, among many other inventions. He would eventually become the founder of Georgia Aerospace, which manufactured specialized composite structures for stealth aircraft. In almost every aspect of his career, Thomas Mensa has met with enormous success, enormous success on the projects that have great historical significance. He has worked for private industry as well as the Department of Energy and the Department of Defense and has been awarded 7 patents. He has also received awards and recognition from the high-tech community, including the Corning Glass Works Industrial Outstanding Contributor Award for Innovation in Fiber Optics in 1985, AT&T Bell Laboratories High Performance Award 1988, and AICHE Williams Grimes Award for Excellence in Chemical Engineering in 2007. He served as a great model for turning great ambition into great success. Hey, what's going on, Duplicat? What's going on, Star? This brother was lit. I mean, he had so many inventions, but he's responsible for basically the internet that we know it as today, the speed of the internet that we know it as today, using fiber optic cable. Fiber optic has been laid out all across the United States by various companies, including Comcast, AT&T, and T, and Verizon. Um, so what you see today is a result of this Ghanaian brother right here who improved the process, patented. So if you want to know why you're using the internet today, or at least high speed internet today, it's because of this brother here. All right, let me go to the next one. Daniel McCree. Daniel McCree recognized the safety benefits enjoyed by hotels, apartment buildings, and build, apartment buildings and office buildings, and decided to extend that safety to homeowners. Based on his model on fire escapes being used by bigger buildings, McCree created a portable version made of wood that would be attached to the windowsill of a home, enabling people within to escape from second and third story levels during a fire. McCree patented the portable fire escape on November 11th, 1890, and it is the basis for similar models used today. I mean, that's amazing. No one was thinking about, you know, building fire escapes or anything like that. It took a brother to actually step to the table and actually do something like this. So hats off to this brother. All right, so this next one is from John Love. Many patents are developed in response to the frustration involved in having to perform a repetitive task in order to complete a more important one. For John Love, the, the repetitive task was having to stop writing notes or letters and able to pull out his knife to whittle his pencil down to the point again. On November 23rd, 1897, Love patented the pencil sharpener, which called for a user to turn the crank and roll off the thin slices of wood from the pencil until the point was formed. 4 years 4 years earlier, Love created and patented his plaster's hawk. The device, a flat square piece of a board made of wood or metal, which upon which plaster or mortar was placed and then spread by plasterers or masons. The device was patented patented on July 9th, 1895. Interesting. I didn't know that. Very interesting. Yeah, that's right. Star. That's actually right. And the thing is, you have to keep in mind that black people were supposed to be illiterate, right? Functional illiterates, where they were just too incompetent and things of that nature. But history proves otherwise. All right, this next one. Share my screen. All right, next one is Edward Lewis. Edward Lewis had a problem with people trespassing on his property, especially poachers. Unfortunately, the only way to prevent people from coming onto his land would be to hide out on the property at all hours and day and night. Lewis solved the problem by developing a spring gun, which he patented on May 3rd, 1887. The spring gun was made of a metal tube which sat atop a block of wood with a wire attached to a trigger mechanism. And across poultry wonder this it's, it's an interesting it's an interesting invention because this is automation back then. So he automated basically a remote fire weapon on his own property. But the thing is, like, if somebody trespass on your property, you have to have some aim. So the idea of using a gun to shoot somebody on your property without actually aiming is actually pretty crude thing to do. All right, next one is Joseph Lee. Joseph Lee was born in 1849 and lived most of his life in Boston, Massachusetts. Lee was very prominent in the food services industry, having begun working as a boy. I got a problem with that. Working as a boy at a bakery. He soon began preparing, cooking, and serving food, eventually opening two successful restaurants in the Boston area. In the late 1890s, he owned and managed the Woodland Park Hotel in Newton, Massachusetts for 17 years. In 1902, as a way of maintaining involvement in the food services called population, interest in eliminating a situation that had become annoying to him. He became very frustrated at what he saw as a waste of bread, which would have to be thrown out if it was as much as a day old. Considered a master cook, Lee had long believed that crumbs from the bread was quite useful in preparing food, as opposed to cracker crumbs, which many others favored. He decided that instead of simply throwing the stale bread away, he would use it to make breadcrumbs. Thus, he thus set out to invent. This is poorly written. The event of the device that could automate tearing. He thus set out to invent the device that could automate tearing, crumbling, and grinding the bread into crumbs. He was he was finally successful in patent the invention on June 4th, 1895. He used the breadcrumbs for various dishes, including croquettes, batter, and cakes. fried chops, fried fish, and more. He soon sold the rights to the bread crumbling machine, and the Royal Worcester Bread Crumb Company of Boston soon had the device in major restaurants around the world. Not one to rest on his laurels, Lee looked for another way of improving food preparation and invented an automatic bread making machine. The machine not only mixed the ingredients, but also kneaded knead the dough. The machine was so fast and efficient, it was able to perform the task of 5 or 6 men and did so more hygienically and at a much cheaper cost. It also produced a higher quality product with a much better taste and texture. He also received a patent for the machine, which is the basis for machines still in use today. Joseph Lee died in 1905 and is an honored pioneer in the food preparation industry. Interesting. He sure did die young though. Yeah, definitely learned something new about that. I'm from Boston. I didn't even know this. Let me see. All right, next one is Ernest Just. Ernest Just was born on August 14th, 1883, in Charleston, South Carolina. His mother worked as a school teacher and his father a dock worker. Died when Ernest was only 4 years old, forcing him to have to work in the fields after school each day. Because high schools in the South provided such poor education at the time, Ernest's mother decided to send him north to receive better schooling. Through hard work, Ernest was able to earn enough money to attend the Kimball Academy in New Hampshire. The Kimball Academy was an exclusive school and just proved himself worthy by excelling in his classes. As the editor of the school newspaper and president of the debating team, Ernest completed the 4 year program in only three, graduating with honors as the valedictorian of his class. In 1903, just entered Ernest just entered Dartmouth College and decided to become a research biologist specializing in cytology, the study of cells. Learning under the guidance of the world famous zoologist William Patton, Ernest Just excelled and received degrees in history and biology. Upon graduating in 1907, he had already been elected to the Phi Beta Kappa honors fraternity, was named class valedictorian, and was the only member of his class to graduate magna cum laude. In October 1907, Ernest Just was hired by Howard University in Washington, D.C., and would eventually become the head of the biology department while also heading the physiology department and serving as a member of the medical school's faculty. With all the responsibilities, Ernest Just was still able to pursue PhD in zoology, which he received in 1916 from the University of Chicago. He experimented with the reproductive systems and cells of marine animals in the Marine Biological Laboratory in Woods Hole, Massachusetts. His research and papers on marine biology was so well received that in 1915, at age 32, Just was awarded the first Springer Medal by the National Association of the Advancement of Colored People, NAACP. Over the last, excuse me, over the last 20 years, Just would perform studies on marine animals and their eggs, as well as on their cell structures. He believed that in learning about healthy cells and cell structures, man could hope to understand and find cures to cellular irregularities and diseases such as sickle cell anemia and cancer. He also researched pathogenous developed marine developing marine eggs without fertilization. He quickly became one of the most respected scientists in his field, but much of that recognition came from abroad as racial bigotry in the United States caused much of his work and his achievements to go unrewarded. In other countries, he was treated as a pioneer, recruited to work with the Russian scientists, and invited to be a guest worker at the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute of Biology, at the time the world's greatest scientific research laboratory. He also welcomed with open arms at Naples at Naples zoological, zoological sorry Naples zoological station in Italy and Sorbonne in France, where he conducted research and shared his ideas. Ernest just died on October 27, 1941, of cancer, leaving behind a wife, Ethel, and three children. He also left behind a world which would eventually recognize him as the most outstanding zoologist of his time. Amazing, amazing man. I do want to highlight this one point though. He quickly became one of the most respected scientists in his field, but much of that recognition came from abroad as racial bigotry in the United States caused much of his work and his achievements to go unrewarded. We still see that to this very day. I'm definitely have to keep tabs on this brother right here. If you guys can hear me in the chat, actually put one in the chat. All right, this next one is Willis Johnson. On February 5th, 1884, Willis Johnson patented a device made up of a handle attached to a series of spring like whisker wires used to help mix ingredients. Prior to his egg beater, all mixing of ingredients was done by hand and was quite labor intensive and time consuming. Wow. Hey, hey, thank you guys in the chat for pressing one. But yeah, definitely interesting that this guy created what was today known as as the egg beater. This is right after slavery. This is what, let me see. This is 10 years after slavery. Very interesting. All right, next one is Lonnie Johnson. You don't have to be a rocket scientist to come up with a great idea, but it certainly doesn't hurt. For Lonnie Johnson, a lifetime of achievement and success at various levels of government and private sector projects not help could not prepare him for the success that he would ultimately achieve by building a better squirt gun. This is poorly written. Lonnie Johnson was born on October 6, 1949, in Mobile, Alabama. His father worked as a civilian driver at a Brooklyn Air Force Base, and his mother was a homemaker who worked part time as a nurse's aide. His father taught Robert and his brothers how to repair various household items, prompting the boys to create their own toys. The boys once made a go kart out of household items and a lawnmower motor. Although his parents were excited about his interest in science and inventing, they weren't prepared for the time he decided to experiment with the rocket fuel he created with sugar and a salt pepper, which exploded and burnt up part of the kitchen. His talents were more refined when he attended Williamson High School in 1968. As a senior, took part of a national science competition sponsored by the University of Alabama. There, he displayed remote control robot named Linux, which he built from which he built from scraps found at a junkyard and parts of his brother's walkie-talkie and his sister's reel-to-reel tape recorder. He placed the first he placed first in the competition and entered Tuskegee University on a mathematics scholarship. At Tuskegee, he was elected into the Pi Sigma National Engineering Honor Society and graduated with distinction in 1973 with a bachelor's of science degree in mechanical engineering. He continued on a Tuskegee and received a master's degree in nuclear engineering in 1975. Wow. After graduation, he took a position at the Savannah River National Laboratory conducting thermal analysis on plutonium fuel spheres. He later served as a research engineer developing cooling systems at the Oak Ridge National Laboratory in Oak Ridge, Tennessee. He then joined Air Force and was assigned to the Air Force Weapons Laboratory in Albuquerque, New Mexico, where he served as the acting chief of the Space Nuclear Safety Section. In 1973, he left the Air Force and took over as senior systems engineer at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory in Pasadena, California. He worked on Galileo mission to Jupiter, but returned in 1982 to his military career. He worked at the Strategic Air Command's facility in Bellevue, Nebraska, and then moved to the SAC Test and Evaluation Squadron at Edwards Air Force Base in Edwards, California, where he was a stealth bomber. He also worked as acting chief at the Space Nuclear Power Safety Section of the Air Force Weapon Laboratory at Kirkland Air Force Base in New Mexico. A captain, he was awarded the Air Force Achievement Medal and the Air Force uh, Commendation Medal. In 1987, Johnson returned to his work at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, where he worked on Mars Observer Project and served as a fault protection engineer on the Saturn Cassini mission project. He later worked as a project engineer for the Craft mission, which studied asteroids. Wow, this dude, this brother did a lot of work. Earlier, around 1982, he was working on developing a heat pump that worked by circulating water rather than expensive and environmentally unfriendly Freon. In his basement at home, he took some tubing with a specially devised nozzle on the other end and connected it to a bathroom sink. When he turned on the faucet, a stream of water shot out of the nozzle across the room with such force that the air currents caused the curtain to move. His first thought was, quote, "This would make a great water gun." Johnson set out to develop a pressured water gun that has safe enough for children to play with. Water guns. This is so poorly written. Water guns at the time very unsophisticated and cheaply made, able to shoot streams of water about 8 feet. Using basic tools, he combined a PVC pipe, a piece of plexiglass, and empty empty plastic soda bottle. His invention worked by partially filling a reservoir tank with water and then using a handle to force air to the chamber. When the trigger was pulled, the air pressure would force water to the exit to exit through a narrow hole, launching a blast of water more than 25 feet. He called his invention the pneumatic water gun, and he continued to receive to revise. He continued revising it until it could shoot almost 50 feet. When he had developed a working model, which he called the power drencher, he and his partner Bruce DeAndre began trying to market it while trying to secure a patent for it. They first they first tried to market it to Daisy Manufacturing, the BB gun manufacturing giant, but no deal could be worked out after two years of negotiations. After securing the patent in 1991, the toy was now called the Super Soaker. Johnson was introduced to Al Davis, an exclusive an executive with Marimi Corp. At a New York City toy fair. 2 weeks later, Johnson was in Larimi's headquarters in Philadelphia. The executives were watching the demonstration, all exclaimed, "Wow." Their only concern was whether anyone would pay $10 for a squirt gun. After signing a deal with Johnson's company, Johnson Research and Development Co., they would all be in for a big surprise. Within a year, all involved knew they had a runaway hit. On the on the popular Tonight Show, host Johnny Carson used a super soaker to drench his sidekick Ed McMahon. Within 10 years, more than 200 million super soakers had been sold. The gun had gone through many modifications and expansions with new product lines and became the toy of the decade. Johnson continued inventing and would eventually hold more than 80 patents. For his contributions to science, Johnson was inducted into the Inventor Hall of Fame in 2000. His company has continued to innovate, create and improve radon detectors, heat pumps, and lithium battery products, as well as toy concepts. Lonnie Johnson didn't have to be a rocket scientist to become a world success, but it sure gave him something to fall back upon. Interesting.
Yeah, what's going on, Mike?
Oh, what's going on, Jack?
Not much, man. Yo, that see, I've heard the brother, but I didn't know he was that accomplished. And I didn't. He's well accomplished, man. Officer, and then all the things he accomplished with part of the space program, like uh, going to school for nuclear engineering. Like this guy is top notch.
Yeah,
So
he's
uh,
everything that I would want to be.
yeah, definitely, yeah. That's amazing. But it's something simple as a super soaker. And I remember growing up as a kid, like that was like one of my favorite toys, and surprised me that a brother did that. I really had no clue that he did that.
Hmm.
So that's amazing, and that like that's a toy that never gets old. It never gets old, and just thinking about it, what you read in that article, it makes me think about the power of goals, right? Like this for just having goals and setting out and going for them. Like nothing's impossible. Like look at all the things this brother did, and it's like, and that was a good article.
Hmm.
What do we thought about that?
Well, I knew he's really crowned as being the guy of the Super Soaker, but I was more impressed by his track record. I didn't know he blew up his mother's kitchen and um you know his accomplishments in the military. I didn't even know he went to the military. I always thought he was just I always just thought he was just this toy guy, this toy inventor. His track record is impressive. You know,
Yeah,
I yeah, but the Super Soaker itself, man, that's a genius product. It's still to this very day, still a genius product. Because I was
Yeah.
looking at some videos in Asia, and everybody it was on some kind of parade they were having. Everybody was using the Super Soaker.
200 million sold. That's damn. That's astronomical. That's a lot. That's a lot. And then they're not cheap. They're no, they're you know they're at a certain price point. So it's like he made a wealth. He made a ton of wealth off of that. He got um and he said his partner they both created together, or
Yeah, I
was
think
it
his
a
partner
business
helped him.
partner?
I think
Helped
his
him.
partner
Okay.
helped him. Yeah.
Yeah, that
But I
was
mean,
that was a good.
obviously, he was the driver behind it initially in the early '80s, right? Because it was
Mm,
prior to it being patented in 1991 and the improvements on it. He he had already worked on it in 1982.
mm, interesting. And
Yeah,
he
that's
holds
very
80.
interesting.
He also holds 80 patents currently right now, right?
Yeah, that we know of,
Mm, that's
right?
interesting.
Because when you really put it together, um, the way how the United States treats brothers, like the last article we had read,
Hmm.
about the brother who's a zoologist. Um, well, no, not that brother. Yeah, that is the same brother, the zoologist, where his creativity was recognized around the world except the United States, right? So we know that brothers get hated on, and then they have to take their ball and go home, or sometimes they don't have their ball at all.
Mm,
So we don't know what black men are capable of doing until we actually give them the opportunity to do it, man.
interesting. Yeah, it seems like to me that it's our creativeness, right? We were able to make something out of nothing. We take out of nothing, we can make something, right? It's like it shows our resourcefulness that we can create anything. And usually, I'm noticing the noticeable trends that not especially this brother, but it's usually with black men when they're back against a wall.
Hmm.
That's when you notice that that's when you see genes start coming out. Like certain things are starting, they create certain things that
Hmm.
that's still used to this day. So that was overall that was a great story. That was a great piece right there.
Yeah, just like Duplicat in the chat just said, Daisy rejected the idea that they lost millions of dollars.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Right, and that's the thing, right? Because it has a black face attached to it, especially a black man's face. They don't believe in it.
Mm.
But when we talk about discrimination and racism and whatnot, people act like they don't know what we're talking about. What are you talking about? We had Obama.
What's
The
up,
Hey
man?
man, I'm trying to get in this spot right here. If you can either
Yeah,
back straight up so until I get in, then you pull up.
no problem. Yeah.
I appreciate it.
All right, let me go to the next one. All right, Jack Johnson. Jack Johnson is one of the most interesting inventors ever. Not simply because of the invention, but more so because of his celebrated and controversial life. Johnson was born on March 31st, my birthday, 1878, in Galveston, Texas, under the name John Arthur Johnson, and spent much of his teenage life working on boats and along the city docks. He began boxing in 1897 and quickly became an accomplished and feared fighter. Standing 6'1" and weighing 192 pounds, Johnson was captured the quote, the colored heavyweight championship of the world on February 3rd, 1903, in Los Angeles, California, and became the world heavyweight champion in 1908. He defeated Tommy Burns for the title and thereby became the first black man to hold to the hearts of the white boxing fans. Johnson was extremely confident about his capabilities and defeated everyone he faced with ease. He also bucked many of the social rules of the day and openly dated white women. This eventually got him into trouble in 1912 when he was arrested for violation of the Mann Act, a law used to prevent black men from traveling with white women. He was charged with taking his white girlfriend Lucille Cameron across state lines, across state lines for immoral purposes. Although he and Lucille married later in the year, he was he was convicted of the crime by Judge Judge Mountain, Judge Mountain Landis, who would later become the commissioner of the Major League Baseball, and was sentenced to federal prison for 1 year. Before he could be in prison, he and Lucille fled to Europe. Johnson eventually returned to the United States and was sent to Leavenworth Federal Prison in Kansas. While in prison, Johnson found need of a tool which would help tighten or loosen fastening devices. He therefore crafted a tool and eventually patented it on April 18th, 1922, calling it a wrench. Jack Johnson died on June 10th, 1946, in an automobile accident in Raleigh, North Carolina, and was elected in the Boxing Hall of Fame in 1954. Although many boxing fans are unaware of the life of the first black heavyweight boxing champion, they probably utilize his invention routinely around their homes. Amazing, absolutely amazing. I had no idea that this dude actually created this device. I think Jack is away right now. So I was, Jack is only known for being this boxing heavyweight guy and running around with white women, but they don't talk about the invention of the wrench.
Yeah, I had no clue that Jack Johnson created that. No clue at all. I thought that'd be the. I'm not gonna lie. That'd be the last one I thought I would create that. That means a lot.
Right.
That's something we use. Especially in my family. That mechanic background is like
Hmm.
that's amazing. That's
Hmm.
really amazing.
Let me see if I can pull up a picture of a wrench. Okay, I think they're talking about an adjustable wrench. Let me see if I can pull this up. See if I can pull this up. Okay, so there's a specific type of wrench that they're referring to. Um, yeah, it's a combination wrench. Interesting. Nate, I'm not sure if he was pardoned by Trump or not. I'm not aware of that. All right, this one is Thomas Jennings. Thomas Jennings stands in history as a noteworthy figure for being the first black person to ever receive a patent, but his life should serve as an example of what was in what could have been for black people the earliest years of the United States. Thomas Jennings was born in 1791 and worked a number of jobs before focusing on what would become his chosen career as a tailor. Jennings' skills were so admired that people near and far came to him for alter to alter or custom tailor items of clothing for them. Eventually, Jennings' reputation grew such to that he was able to open his own store on Church Street, which grew into one of the largest clothing stores in New York City. Jennings, of course, found that many of his customers were dismayed when their clothing became soiled, and because of the material used, were unable to use conventional means to clean them. Conventional means would often ruin the fabric, leaving the person either continue wearing the items in their soiled condition or to simply discard them. While this would have while this would have provided a boon to his business through increased sales, Jennings also hated to see the items which he worked so hard to create thrown away. He thus set out experimenting with different solutions and cleaning agents, testing them on various fabrics until he found the right combination to effectively treat and clean them. He called his method dry scoring, and it is a process that we now refer to as dry cleaning. In 1820, Jennings applied for a patent for his dry scoring service, his dry scoring process. In light in light of the times, he was fortunate that he was a free man born in the United States and thus an American citizen. Under the United States patent laws of 1793 and later, as revised in 1836, a person must sign an oath or a declaration stating that they were a citizen of the United States. While there were apparently provisions through which a slave could enjoy patent protection, the ability of a slave to seek out, receive, and defend a patent was unlikely. Later, in 1958, the patent office changed laws stating that since slaves were not citizens, should be 1858, stating that uh, stating that since slaves were not citizens, they could not hold a patent. And furthermore, the court in, in, in the famous case Oscar Stewart versus that case said that the slave owner, not being the true inventor, could not apply for a patent either. In true irony, when many of the southern states seceded from the Union to form the Confederate States of America, CSA and Jefferson Davis legislation made a fortune. What makes Jennings noteworthy is not just that he was an entrepreneur or that he received a patent or even that the fact that he became very wealthy. What is noteworthy is that a vast amount of the proceedings of his business imported into abolitionist activities throughout the Northeast. In fact, in 1831, he became the assistant secretary for the first annual convention of the people of color in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. He passed his sense of self worth to his daughter Elizabeth, whose public bus in New York City, with she riding to go to church. Because of her father's prominence and wealth, she was able to obtain the best legal representation and hired the law firm Culver Parker and Arthur to sue the bus company and was represented in court by a young attorney named Chester Arthur, who would go on to become the 21st president of the United States. Ms. Jennings would ultimately win her case in front of the Brooklyn Circuit Court in 1855. Thomas Jennings died in 1859. and will go down in history as the first black person to obtain a patent. But he should rather be seen as an example of a citizen who made the best of his life and sought to use good fortune to make life better for those around him. Talk about being pro black.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing, man. Yeah, it's very interesting, man, to see how they were denied it. Like you had somebody who was coming to contribute, and then they were denied the right, you know, to do that. And it's like it makes you think about that time period, right? Like that time period, it was, you know, there was really an issue. They thought there was more. Some people thought they were more superior than others when those they thought they were superior than then, you know, literally built everything, built your economy, built your country, uh, you know, built everything for you guys, right? So it's like, that false sense of superiority over somebody else, which is something kind of crazy to me. But seeing that how he came from a slave and then, you know, he rose to wealth then to power, which he was able to help his daughter and certain things like that. Like, you know, there's a lot of people here. I'm just looking at that. I'm like, there's a lot of people here right now who aren't facing none of those obstacles that he was facing, right? And have have more of a percentage to succeed than he did, but a lot of people are not really taking advantage of that. And then the issue with and then the situation where he made that wealth and he was able to give back to help other blacks, who were in the same situation. So to me, I look at it and it's like, there are really people there back there and really making real moves, right? With their money, with their influence, with their power,
Hmm.
right? They're really making moves. They weren't really just saying, I'm pro black. They just were pro black. I don't think they even saw themselves as pro black. They just wanted to make a difference. So um I think something we should learn from. Like learn from that is like, okay, there's no excuses. He had every right to say there were excuses for him, but he didn't, you know, take heed to that. So it's like it's all about your mindset, and there's really no excuse for people now to make a difference in their lives and the lives of others. So that was a great piece.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I just find it interesting that today's pro black person is always wearing a costume. They always have the unk piece. They always have the dashiki on. They always have all of these, get ups to identify their pro blackness. But these cats back then, they were doing this at the height of white supremacy, at the height of racism, and still they still saw an urgency to help people on the ground without actually calling themselves all these things. Because back then they just wore suit and ties. There was no such thing as jeans back then. Jeans didn't come around until after slavery, not before slavery.
So I guess that's another something we should think about. But like shedding that false sense of pro blackness, like true. What looking at that, what do you in your mindset? What do you think is true pro black? Like we are truly pro black. Like seeing what they're doing, seeing what's going on now. Like to you, what is being pro black? You know, in your mindset, in your thoughts.
I don't know anymore. It's because the term is so loosely tossed around. It
Mm,
doesn't mean anything anymore. It's been degraded.
that's deep. That's
It's,
deep.
it's, it's been completely degraded. You can't even tell who's pro black. Um,
Mm,
I mean, at this point, it really doesn't have any meaning. You just to be pro black, it means to be actionable. To me, you have to
yeah.
actually put boots on the ground and actually do something. Somebody has to be able to verify your work. A lot of what's going on right now in the black community is just people just getting behind a keyboard and using certain terms and overusing these terms and whitewashing the terms and redefining the terms so that they can hold the title of pro black without actually doing anything.
Mm. So it's all pseudo. It's fake.
It's been It's been commercialized.
Mm,
It's been commercialized. You can see people, they're doing lectures, they're getting paid big money for it for these appearances, and I'm not working with this person because they didn't secure the bag. Go back in history. These cats had the bag, or whether they had the bag or not, they still did the work.
mm. And the crazy thing about it, every day, it wasn't like they're focused on doing the work and staying alive.
Uh-huh.
That's crazy. Like, oh my gosh, that's crazy. That's crazy.
Yeah, you had to worry about back then. You had to worry about getting killed.
Just
Somebody was gonna
yo,
lynch you from a tree or something like that, or somebody was gonna
just
shoot
walk like you can like walk down the street. Just walking down the street, somebody could have snatched you up. It
you.
was that's crazy.
Right. Let me get to the next one. All right, next one is Joseph Hawkins. Joseph Hawkins developed what we are now known as metal oven racks to aid in home cooking. The oven racks were based on gridirons, which were metal racks attached to wooden handles and were placed on a campfire or placed inside of a fireplace to heat or broil various types of meat. By the early 1800s, gridirons, as most homes had begun using kitchen stoves upon which to cook. Hawkins received a patent for the improved gridiron on May 26, 1845. The device allowed for different items to be cooked at a different level of heat intensity, thus enabling cooks to heat several types of food at once. Wow, that's something because it's
Yeah,
still being
it's
used
something
to this
so
very
simple.
day.
Yeah,
It's still
it's so simple.
mhm.
Mm. Do they okay, when he create these patents, right? Now this is what I like to know. When he create these patents, do they continue to make money off these patents? Like if a company wants to, create a oven, right? And they need that, that I need a rack. Do they have to all these how long these patents stay in say active for usually?
I think patents have a shelf life of like 20 plus years or 25 years,
Okay.
if I remember correctly, and then it becomes open source. I think at that point.
Mm. Okay, okay. Yeah, but uh on other note, like that's something being used to this day, man. Like everybody has has an oven rack in their home, so it's like created by a black man. It's like um yeah, that's funny. Like black men, I think are highly marginalized, right?
Mhm.
But we offer so much to society. We help with the progression of our society, of U.S. Of even global society. It's a whole globe. We create things that help us everyone, and it's like, well, we're heavily marginalized. We don't. We It's like they don't want to hear our voice. Uh, I watch the news. Uh, they don't want black men to give their opinion, right? So it's crazy how we contribute so much. We make a big difference, but we get shut out. So I don't understand it. I don't
Yeah,
understand it.
yeah. There's a war against brothers. That's all it is. There's a war against brothers, not just from the dominant society, but within our community. You can see it right now. We only have 10 people watching our hangout, but on other hangouts, there's 100, 200 people talking about things that don't improve life and things that you didn't even know about. Um, it's just one of those things that is why we have this platform, so we can actually change that narrative. So because we have to be able to control the narrative for ourselves, and we don't have control over the narrative. That's why we're having this problem. So with this platform, we try to control the narrative by putting out a more positive image of black people, and more importantly, black men, rather than to have somebody try to shame us for actually having an opinion or even having the audacity to speak.
Uh,
Hmm.
I agree, man. 100% agrees with you. It's like you know, going to college, going to school. They can have a class on this, right? They don't teach this. Not even in the urban areas. They don't really. It's only what 30 days of Black History Month. They go into this, so it's like they don't even. There's so much research, so much things were created by Black men that you know, I think we can really learn from. And we can spring new ideas off of that. So
Hmm.
I think they kind of holding themselves back, kind of hiding this information. Not so much hiding, but not really pushing this information. Pushing the historical data of what the things that Black men have created. So um,
It's a suppression of information.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Suppression information, correct. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
it's modern day book burning. You know, back when the
mm,
Europeans came into Africa, the first things they did was they had, besides killing people, they had the intellectual class of people actually transcribe the books, what was written, and they
mm.
transcribed it into English, and then they burned the books.
So they try to write us out of history, just take away our history.
Oh, absolutely, they're still finding books right now in Africa that was buried before the colonialists got there.
Wow.
Thousands of years ago. They find them inside these tombs and whatnot. So
Mm.
black people were involved in the the print publishing and pressing of information thousands of years prior to the colonialists getting to Africa.
So well,
So we
highly
we
advanced, highly advanced.
yeah, highly advanced, but at the same time, people don't want to see this information put out because then it discredits a lot of what is told about black people. That somehow we need more police in our neighborhoods because of niggers, right? But if you
Mm.
really look through history, you see there was nothing but black men and women, but more importantly, black men in this context that were inventing things and doing things. They were outrunning, outpacing their white male counterparts.
Mm. Maybe that's what they're afraid of. I was it's interesting. Like maybe an hour or two, I was doing a little research on the Little Rock Nine, right? And what happened in 1957. When they desegregated certain schools. So it's like maybe and I see. I was reading and seeing the things that were going on. They were spit on, people threw acid on them, and I was thinking like, why was that so much big of a problem, right? Why was that a problem for them to go to a different school? And it's like, what were they so afraid of? And I think maybe they're afraid that if they were to stop cutting certain people at their knees, they can they can outrun them. So I think it's more of an issue of fear that maybe they knew what we are, they know what we can create, what we have created, and they suppress it. And they don't want us to outdo them. Maybe that's what I think it is. So yeah.
Well, if you eliminate competition, then what that does for you or for that person or those
Hmm.
group of people, um, it allows them to it allows them to excel on their own, right? So there's no hurdles in place. Basically, if I don't have to compete with anybody, I'm always number one.
Mm. That's interesting. Dang, that's deep.
Yeah,
That's deep.
that's
Mm.
that's white supremacy in a nutshell. White supremacy robs black men of their agency. So if this information provides agency to black men, then into black people, then what happens here is now you have a group of people who you've largely denied them agency for the last 200, 300, 400 years. They suddenly have agency. Now, what are you going to do about them if the agency is equal to yours?
Mm. Ah, that's I don't know, that's heavy. So pretty much, is this is this a game? They pretty much want to win the game. They feel like why give them they don't want to compete with anybody. They
They
don't
can't
want to
compete with
compete.
anybody. They can't compete
Mm.
with anybody.
Mm. Interesting.
Let me get to this next one.
All right.
Lloyd Hall was born on June 20th, 1894, in Elgin, Illinois. He was an honor student while attending West Side School in Aurora, Illinois, and captained the school debate team while competing in baseball, football, and track. Lloyd graduated high school in the top 10 of his class and had to choose between four college scholarships offers. He decided to attend Northwestern University, earning a bachelor's degree in pharmaceutical chemistry in 1916. While at Northwestern, Hall attended classes with a fellow student named Carol Griffith, who would later go on to become the founder of the Griffith Laboratories. After graduation, Hall earned a graduate degree from the University of Chicago. Hall was soon hired by Western Electric Company through a telephone interview. When he showed up for his first day, however, he was told by a personnel officer that we don't take niggers. Recovering from this slight, he began working for the Chicago Department of Health as a chemist and was promoted in 1917 to a senior chemist. The next year, he moved to Ottumwa, Iowa, where he held a position of chief chemist at the John Morrow Company. During this time, World War I broke out, and Hall received an appointment as chief inspector of powder and explosives for the United States Ordnance Group Department. On September 23rd, 1919, Lloyd married Marion Newsom, a teacher from Macomb, Illinois. 2 years later, the couple moved to Chicago, where Lloyd began working for the Boyer Chemical Laboratory, where he took the position of chief chemist and focused on the emerging field of food chemistry and began looking at a way of preserving meats with chemicals. In 1922, he moved to a chemical products corporation where he served as president and chemical director of their consultant laboratory and often consulted with Griffith Laboratories. In 1925, Hall was offered a position with Griffith Laboratories as chief chemist and of director of research. Griffith Laboratories, of course, had been founded by Hall's former classmate Carol Griffith, and years later, and after years of moving from company to company, Hall accepted the position and remained there for the next 34 years. Hall had been working for a number of years exploring the different areas of food chemistry, and upon Griffith Laboratories began looking into methods of preserving foods. Up to that point, foods, and especially meats, had been preserved by using sodium chloride, salt, or table salt, as well, nitrogen-containing chemicals, which also used to preserve meats. It was found that into hmm, nitrates chemically change into nitrates and then into nitrous acid, and cause the meats to maintain a healthy red color. The process was referred to as curing meat. Hall found, however, that when sodium chloride, sodium nitrate, and sodium nitrate was used in order to preserve and cure the meat, the nitrates and nitrates penetrated the meat much faster than did the sodium chloride. In doing so, the nitrates and nitrates adversely affected the meat by breaking it down before the sodium chloride had a chance to preserve it. In order to correct this, Hall found a while. Yeah, this is poorly written. Hall found a way of encasing the nitrates and nitrates with a sodium chloride quote shell by utilizing a process called flash drying the crystals over heated rollers. This allows sodium nitrate to be introduced into the meats first and dissolve, and then the nitrates and nitrates were able to penetrate the quote preserved meat and therefore cure it. Hall next addressed the problem which arose when meats were stored in containers. The sodium chloride nitrate combination tended to absorb the moisture from the air inside or the container and cause them to form a caked mass on top of the meat. Hall was able to determine that by adding a glycerin and alkali metal tartrate to the original combination. The glycerin and tartrate would effectively absorb the moisture without caking and thus preventing the chloride nitrate combination from absorbing it. Hall also Hall also maintained an interest in sterilizing foods, utensils, and tools. Although many people thought that the certain spices and flavorings also had added benefit of preserving food. Hall found that many of these agents were exposed the foods to an abundance of germs, molds, and bacteria. Hall set out to prevent this while at the same time allowing the spices and flavors to retain the aroma and the color. Many of these lost their color and aroma flavor when exposed to high. He eventually should have said high temps. He eventually found a gas called ethylene oxide, which he introduced to other foods in the vacuum environment, which eliminated the germs and bacteria while maintaining appearances, taste, and aroma. These contributions to food preservation and sterilization revolutionized the way foods were processed, prepared, and packed and transported, eliminating spoilage and health hazards and improving efficiency and profitability. The food profitability for food supplies. In the course of work, Hall would publish more than 5 scientific papers and receive more than 100 patents. He also served as an advisor to the United States during 2 world wars and served on dozens of advisory panels and boards and received hundreds of awards and accolades. In 1959, Hall retired from Griffith Laboratories and moved to Pasadena, California, where he died in 1971. He left behind a legacy as a pioneer in the field of chemistry and is responsible for improving health conditions in all areas of the food industry. Amazing.
Yeah, that was amazing. And it shows you too that when one door closes, another one opens, right? He set out to find a job, and you know they call him a nigger and they want to give him a job. So it's like, and look what he did. He worked under administration at the White House. So it's like
Mhm.
for 2 wars. So
Oh,
it's
oh, mhm.
go ahead. What you gonna say?
Oh, yeah, but they'll deny that. Oh, yeah, racism does exist. What are you talking about? It's a free country, and white privilege doesn't exist. What are you talking about?
Mm, that's deep. It's true, but this 100 patents, right? And then it's like this is something like companies right now depends on. They depend on this. They need this. Right? You know how much food, like everybody needs this. So it's like this is amazing.
Hmm.
It's amazing. It's the and another thing that's kind of interesting. What was coming to me was just to be able to create 100 patents and to figure that out. You know how much time and research. How much time it takes to just to stick to that one thing to figure out that goal. So it's like
Hmm.
it shows you the determination he had,
Hmm.
and and then it worked out for him,
Hmm.
which worked out for everybody else because everybody needs this. So
In
um,
society, another black
yeah,
man changes society.
yeah, you're right, you're right, you're right, man,
Saving humanity. Because
humanity, you're right.
if everybody would have eaten those meats, there would have been a lot of food poisoning going on and people dying.
Mm, that's true,
Hmm.
and it'd be a lot of companies losing profit, if they didn't have this. So you got to think about the jobs created from this. You got to think about uh, health, right? Maintained. Like he left a mark. He left a mark on the world. So and but one person thought him as a nigger.
Oh,
So
absolutely.
it's crazy. It's crazy.
But they had laws written back then. That was during Jim Crow. So the
Mm,
way the laws are written and the way the society was structured was that black men should not have access to these high performance positions. That you should just, sit in the corner and twiddle your thumbs and shine shoes for a living.
mm.
All right,
That's the.
let me get to this next one. All right, next one is George Grant. George F. Grant knew what most of us have come to recognize. The average golfer is a hacker, destroying grass courses and terrorizing other golfers, homeowners and passersby with wild, dangerous drives. Although he loved the game, he grew frustrated trying to keep the ball from rolling away from him as he attempted to tee off and did not want to swing the ball while it was moving, thus sending off a wild shot. On December 12, 1899, Grant patented a golf tee which raised the golf ball made of rubber at the time slightly off the ground, enabling the player greater control with his wooden club and therefore of the direction and speed of the drive. The tee was made of a small wooden peg with a concave piece of rubber on the top to hold the ball in addition to helping with the control of the direction of the shot. It also aided in promoting longer drives. George Grant's small invention has become a standard piece of equipment for all golfers.
So I'll be clear. So the T is the little spike that goes into the ground. The ball sits on top of that, right?
Yes.
Okay, that's. I had no clue a brother created that. That is crazy. That is
Yeah.
crazy. And like, wow, wow, man. I'm in my 30s. I did not know that. I did not know that.
This is in the 1800s, right? So this is right after, or the late 1800s, but this is right after slavery.
Mm,
When they talk about slavery, they always show some like they always reenact slaves picking cotton, chucking bales of hay, just so incompetent at life. They were so downtrodden. There were some brothers out there who had a lot of who were woke. They
mm.
were woke. They said, as soon as this shit's over, man, I'm about to go out there and do some shit. I'm gonna put in some work. I can imagine what the conversations were like back then.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Definitely, definitely. Yes, yes. So what does that mean? That mean you know, they were conscious. They were there. Yeah, they were awake. They're ready to go. They just wanted the opportunity. Again, the key is the opportunity, man. They just needed the opportunity to create and to build. And I think that's in our nature. It's in our nature to do that naturally. We, just looking back, and just in ancient history, right? In Africa, you know, this is nothing new. Like we've been creating. We created sciences. You know, we created technological devices. We created so much things. Buildings, uh, pyramids. We created so many things back then. I think it's in our nature to do this, right? So um, that's why I think when giving especially a black man a chance to have free reign of his life to do what he naturally does, he's naturally going to create. He's naturally going to you know add to society, right? It's just a key just letting him do that. So that's very interesting. Interesting.
All right, let me get to this next one. Meredith Gordine. Meredith Charles Flash Gordine was born on September 26, 1929, in Newark, New Jersey. His father worked as a painter and janitor and instilled within his son the importance of a strong work ethic. Meredith attended, excuse me, Meredith attended Brooklyn Technical High School, and after classes, he helped his father on various jobs, often working 8 hours a day. However, his father believed that education was more important than just developing into a hard worker, and he told him, quote, if you don't want to be a laborer all your life, stay in school. Meredith minded his father's advice, excelling in academics and excelling in academics. He was also an excellent athlete, competing in track and field and swimming during his senior year. He did well enough in swimming to be offered a scholarship to the University of Michigan, but he turned it down to enter Cornell University. He paid his way through Cornell for the first 2 years before receiving a track and field scholarship after his sophomore year. He competed in sprints, hurdles, and the long jump, standing 6 feet and weighing 175 pounds. He starred for his school, winning 4 titles at the Intercollegiate Association of Amateur Athletes of America championship and led Cornell to a second place finish at the 1952 NCAA Track and Field Championship. The University of Southern California won the meet and but boasted 36 athletes while Cornell only had 5. Gordine Gordine was so heralded that he was chosen to represent the United States at the 1952 Summer Olympic Games in Helsinki. He received a silver medal in the long jump competition, losing to fellow American Jerome Biffle by 1.5 inches. Quote, I would have rather lost by a foot, he would later say. I still have nightmares about it. After graduating from Cornell with a bachelor's degree in engineering physics in 1953, he entered the United States Navy as an officer. He soon returned to academia, entering the California Institute of Technology, the recipient of a uh, Guggenheim Fellowship. He received a PhD in engineering science in 1960. During his time at Caltech, he served on the technical staff of the Rommel Woolridge Corporation, and then as a senior research scientist at the Caltech Jet Propulsion Laboratory. After graduation, he became a lab director for the Plasmadyne Corporation until 1962, when he joined the Curtiss Wright Corporation, serving as chief scientist. In 1964, Gordine borrowed $200,000 from family and friends and opened Gordine Laboratories, a research laboratory located in Livingston, New Jersey. And height, at its height, he employed 150 people. In 1973, he founded and served as CEO of Energy Innovation Incorporated in Houston, Texas, which produced direct energy conversion devices, converting low-grade coal into inexpensive transportable and high-voltage electricity or electrical energy. Meredith Gordine, his companies performed research and development specifically in the field of electrogas dynamics. Electrogas dynamics refers to the generation of energy from the motion of ionized gas molecules under high pressure. His biggest creation was the incinerator system, which was used to disperse smoke from burning buildings and could be used to disperse fog on airport runways. The incinerator system worked by negatively charging smoke or fog, causing the airborne particles within to be electrical magnetically charged and then to fall to the ground. Interesting. The result was clean air clear in a clear area. He also received patents for the focus flow heat sink, which was used to cool computer chips as well as process for desalinating seawater. For developing acoustic imaging, and for a high-powered industrial paint spray. Over his career, Gordine held over 30 patents, and many of his creations served as the basis for allergen filtration devices common to households across the world. He was inducted into the Engineering and Science Hall of Fame in 1994 towards his latter years. He suffered from diabetes and lost his sight as well as one leg due to the disease. Meredith Gunine died on November 20th, 1998, due to complications from multiple strokes. He left behind a legacy of research, design, and innovation that will continue to have impact for many years. Amazing brother.
Yeah, he that that what was that called? The incinerate? How do you pronounce that? The incinerator? Not incinerator, but the
Cinderay?
yeah. You ever seen that in the use before? You ever saw that before?
I haven't personally.
Okay. Yeah, this is achieved a lot, man, especially as an athlete and also academia. He achieved a lot.
Played in the
Especially,
Olympics.
yeah, yeah, it's like, man, his brother did it all. Did it all. Hmm. So let me ask you a question, especially with you having that engineering background. When it comes to, R&D, right? Right now we have, so much technology that kind of helps with that. But back then, when you're talking about like the 50s and 60s, you know, you know, when it comes to to research and that type of technology, like how difficult was it back then to as far as like creating new things, just because with the technology we have now, you have all these sensors, you have the internet, you have all these different type of things that can help you with your research, right? Like back then, how was it back then? You think it was just to as far as R&D and you know and inventing back then?
Oh crap! You had to hire a lot of interns and graduates to
Mm,
actually come in and do the research for you. You didn't have computers like that to run simulations. You can only
okay.
do that by hand.
Hmm. So so it was a lot more difficult from what I'm taking. It was a lot difficult and it's more tedious, and you needed more of the intellectual resources, right?
Yeah, you had
Compared
to
to
hire.
now.
Yeah, you had to hire a lot of people. That's why jobs were so plentiful back then because uh, you had different teams you had to build out to do in order to do simulations. You had to do QA, which is quality assurance, and then QE, quality engineering.
Mm,
Um, and then you had research analysts that sat under those QA and QEs, and then you had project managers, and it was just a whole litany of things of
mm,
to build out a actual team, an actual department for that matter. Um, so STEM was big back then, just as it is today. It was just in a different formation.
okay.
But listen to this brother's story where he borrowed money from his family to start his own corporation that hired hundreds of people that you know went on to do great things. It just shows that at one point black people were they were on something major back then.
Mm,
They saw something big back then. They were at the height of consciousness, but at the same time they were academically focused.
mm.
Today, cats just wear their pants sagging, got tattoos on their faces, and spend hundreds of dollars on Jordans and True Religion jeans.
Do you think back then it was more of a kind of like a communal sense of purpose? Like, we need to elevate, we need to rise, all of us need to take it to the next level. Because we don't have much rights, we don't have uh, they didn't have so much kind of their hands in the right way. In the working of society, right? As far as like the government and just with the laws, they were kind of restricted. So you think there was more of a need to like, okay, we got to push it. We need to let's help each other get to the next level. Let's help each other achieve. Okay, for him to raise $200,000 for to create his research lab
Hmm.
and his business is like that's huge. Back then, that was in
That would be
1964.
that would be $2 million today in today's money.
Oh man,
So they
so
were
a
doing
lot.
they were doing crowdfunding before there was a such thing as crowdfunding.
Mm. So this is not nothing new.
No, man, this is I mean, it's new in terms of how we go about it today, but back
Yeah, yeah.
then there was an urgency to say, I got an idea and somebody's going to get behind you. Today it's not like that.
Mm.
We take our best and our brightest and we marginalize them, and then we bring in, the unproductive cat. The
Mm.
cat with the tattoos who goes around knocking up women and things of that nature. We don't promote our best and our brightest, man. If we read in the article, the other brother, his father told him, if you want to be a laborer your whole life, if you don't want to be a laborer your whole life, then you better go stay in school. You better do better in school. So this idea that black fathers were never there and the black woman was abandoned, these are stories that can't be verified, and it's easily told by some of the most despicable people in our community.
Mm.
But reading over these autobiographies, these snippets, tells you a different story. Like these are facts,
Mm.
and every last one of these brothers filed at least one patent. Today, you can't find a brother out here that can even tie his own shoes. That's why they got automated shoelaces on sneakers now by Nike.
So what does that mean? That mean we're not productive. Our priorities are out of order. We need more productivity, right? And I think what's great about the Black Brain Trust, right? It gives people examples of that productivity, of what can be done, right? And then
Mm-hmm.
all it takes is somebody to put the initiative. Because you know, the thing with that is like I'm learning is like you don't like again we discussed this many times. Like, you don't have to know everything before you start. Just start doing something.
Mm-hmm.
We preach that. So you're right, man. I think there's a lack of productivity in the black community.
A lack of productivity it stems from lack of literacy. So in
Mm,
order for you to be productive, you actually have to be literate.
interesting. I didn't know that.
Hmm. Let me hit this next one.
Okay.
All right, next one is from James Fortin. James Fortin was born in 1766 as a free black man in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Over the course of his lifetime, he would make an immense of industries and lives of his fellow man. Fortin was the son of Thomas and Sarah Fortin and the grandson of slaves. He was raised in Philadelphia and educated in Anthony Benzen's Benezet's Quaker School for Colored Children. At age 8, James began working for Robert Bridges' sail loft and work alongside his father. A year later, his father died in a boating accident, and James was forced to take on additional work to provide for his family. When he turned 14, he worked as a powder boy during the Revolutionary War on the Royal Louis sailing ship. After being captured by the British, he was released and return home to again begin working in Mr. Bridges' loft. Released with his work and ambition, Mr. Bridges eventually appointed him to the foreman's position in the loft. In 1798, Bridges decided to retire and wanted Fortin to remain in charge of the loft. In charge of the loft, he loaned enough money to Fortin to purchase the loft, and soon James owned the business and employing 38 people. Around this time, Fortin began experimenting with the different types of sails for ships and finally invented one that he found was better suited for maneuvering and maintaining greater speeds. Although he did not patent the sail, he was able to benefit financially as his sailing loft became one of the most successful and prosperous ones in Philadelphia. The fortune he soon was made was enormous for any man, black or white. Fortune spent his money and lived a luxurious life, but he also made good use of his resources on people other than himself. More than half of more than half of his considerable fortune was devoted towards abolitionist cause. It, I want to stop right here. We've covered over 20 black men the last couple of hangouts.
Hmm.
Almost every single last one of these brothers who had money actually helped their people out.
Mm.
Every last one of them. Let me finish reading this. He often purchased slaves' freedom, and helped to finance and bring in funding for William Garrison's newspaper, the Libertarian. Opened his home on Lombard Street as an underground railroad depot and opened a school for black children. James Forten died in 1842 after living an incredible life. His early year his early years were devoted to providing for his mother, his middle years towards building his fortune and supporting his family, in his later years to uplifting his fellow man. He was not only a great inventor, but an even greater man. Amazing.
This is what you should aspire to become. Like doing this, like um, again, like his father died and he had to work to provide for his family. He became wealthy, took half of his wealth, bought took slaves out of slavery, create schools, and you know, help just end slavery. So it's like, man, like you just think on it, and it's like, man, like that's what black man should be doing. That's what we should be focused on. I think we were caught up in it's crazy. If I look at certain communities and we caught up on like trying to get females or or just trying to flash, making money just to show off to people. Like, no, 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 no. It's about the greater good. It's about taking what you make and giving back. So they don't make men. They don't make men like this no more, man. These were different type of breed of brothers, different type of breed, man. They were on a whole nother wavelength, right? So there's brothers out there that's doing this, but there's very few. But if we all were on this level, we all was working like this, man, and unified, this would be a different world. So this is remarkable what he did, and it's like back then it's like they're all on that level. They all want to do that. So um, is the what's your thoughts on this? 'Cause I know it kind of you got to stop in the middle of your reading. Like what's your thoughts on this?
Another woke brother. Another pro black brother. Without having to wear the label of pro black and without running around with dashikis and tambourines and pouring out libation and stuff like that. This brother was on fire. These brothers were on fire back then. You did all of that and you still had the gumption to help people. Like
Mm,
you don't see that today, right? I
no.
mean, this his father died when he was young. He was forced at 14 to actually, um, fend for the family, and then he got captured by the British, and then the British released him, and then he went back and did great things, and then he still helped his people. That's a legacy. Today,
Mm,
you don't see brothers on that level. Like they don't even care. But then a lot of people want to claim to be pro black, but then they don't do anything. They think that bootlegging DVDs and having unks tattooed on them and burning incense and banging his tambourines around,
mm,
saying "Ashe, Ashe," you know that's being pro black. But in today's in today's context, he would be considered an educated lame.
mm.
Most of these brothers that we're talking about, I mean, with the exception of Jack Johnson, they'll be considered educated lames, and they wouldn't be chosen by our women today. I mean, that's a whole other subject, but it's the point of the matter is that these were the best of the best that the black community had to offer.
Yeah.
And in today's market, today's sexual, well, I shouldn't say sexual market, but In today's community, they wouldn't even be respected.
Mm.
Even Lonnie Johnson doesn't get any credit. I mean, we know about Lonnie Johnson because of what we do, but overall, he's not revered. We don't, our best and the brightest men are not revered at all.
So let me ask you a question, man. What to spark that fire, right? Um, into brothers to get back on this level, to get our community back on this level again, of that productivity and this giving back. Like, what needs to be done? Obviously, we're here, we're going back and going through these autobiographies and giving the information. But what's the first step, man? Because we need to get back to that, right? I think that's what's lacking. You know, we give praise to things that's not important. That doesn't really make a difference. So, what do you think? What do you suggest is a necessary step to take to get this back, to get us back to this level?
We have to create a class of boys or people, for that matter, but more importantly, black boys who actually come from this sort of legacy, where you keep handing down that sort of intellectual and performance driven culture. I mean, today you don't have that, right? You just have unproductive people being rewarded with all types of accolades for nothing, for really doing nothing. Like in other communities, that would never be the case. Other communities are actually performance driven and through academia and through adventurous means, and we don't have that. I mean, you can see it all over YouTube, all over YouTube, all over social media. You can see brothers who are just not about anything, and they get a lot of credit. And the cats like this, they don't get any credit at all, and it's unfortunate because this idea of lifting up the black community and defeating white supremacy and being great again like our ancestors. You can never be like these cats ever. All right, next one is David Fisher. David Fisher responded to the needs of furniture workers by trying to make the work easier, safer, and more productive. He created and patented two devices which eased the burden of these workers and improved their efforts. His first inventions was aimed at freeing up time for carpenters and furniture makers. At the time when furniture was being put together, a worker was forced to work in slow steps, pausing in various times to combine pieces of wood together in order to allow glue to them, bind them. Fisher solved this delay by developing the joiner's clamp, which he April 20th, 1875. The joiner's clamp consisted of two pieces of wood connected by two screws, then tightened. When tightened, the screws would the screws pushed the glue. Another dilemma fact facing workers in the furniture industry was the laborious task of moving heavy pieces of furniture. In addition to having concern themselves with their own physical safety, they also had to worry about dropping the furniture and damaging other items in the room by bumping into them. On March 14th, 1876, Fisher patented the furniture casters. This device was a free turning wheel, which piece of is used in almost every street. This is crazy.
I'm not sure. Yeah, have you seen one of these before? I'm not sure what a furniture
Caster,
caster is.
caster is like a wheel. It's a spherical wheel on the bottom of a couch,
Oh,
or even a chair, right? So you look at computer chairs when they swivel around. Those are casters.
okay.
He
Wow.
invented that.
Wow, that's deep. Dang. I didn't no clue at all.
Or
Hmm.
even the dolly, right? The dolly that you see that pallets get put on.
Yeah.
That's his invention.
Wow. That's great. That's great.
Hmm.
It's like something so simple as a dolly. Like man, something so simple,
Hmm.
and it's still being used to like all his inventions are still being used today, and it's something so simple, just as a caster or a dolly, and like I'm sure he amassed a wealth from this. So
Well,
so it's like,
he changed the whole entire labor industry with this.
mm, he made his dent. He put his dent in it.
But
You
nobody
know,
would ever know that, right? I mean, you're moving furniture around. You don't stop and say, you know what, brother invented this. but let me take about 1 second in silence. A moment of silence for this brother.
yeah, yeah. For not breaking my back right now and carrying this. So that's true. That's true. Man, that's awesome. That's awesome.
Hmm. All right, let me get to this next one. Henry Faulkner. In 1890, Henry Faulkner decided to work on a problem that caused suffering in people every day. Foot problems caused by lack of ventilation inside shoes. For years, people constantly complained about blisters and sores on their feet, as well as excessive sweating and aching caused by walking and standing with shoes on which often offered no cooling air to circulate within. Faulkner devised a method for placing holes in specific locations within the shoe, thus allowing adequate circulation and greater comfort. Faulkner patented the ventilation shoe on April 29th, 1890, and thereby helped to provide comfort and healthy feet to the world. Another brother saves the planet.
Yeah, right. Wow, that's really smart because I've always noticed that, but I didn't know, never thought about that. So when it comes to these inventions, right? It's like to me, it's like all they're doing is just solving problems. Like they notice there's a problem and they solve it. Let's say somebody who's aspired to become like an inventor who wants to create something. What do you suggest? Like, just focus on certain problems, or like, what do you suggest?
Um, you can look in your neighborhood, in your own environment, and see where the problems are,
Hmm.
and you can come up with your own solution. I mean, I talked about this with you before. I mean, with you guys on the panel before that there was a need in the neighborhood, and people were wondering why. I think one of the politicians or something like that said, "How come it's so dirty in the neighborhood?" And somebody said, "Because there's no trash cans." And the look on their face was like, "Oh, well, maybe we should provide trash cans." No shit, you don't think? So somebody came up with the contraption. Somebody they put trash cans there, but the trash cans kept overfilling because there was no way for the city to know that the trash cans were full because they only have a set um, schedule to send out their guys twice a week. That's not enough for a neighborhood. You got a neighborhood of 100,000 people. Um, so you need, their trash can is going to fill up by the next day, and they never came out to, you know, to to change the barrels. So the trash is overfilled, and it just looked like a big mess, and it was disgusting. So somebody came up with the idea to have a trash barrel that's connected to a Wi-Fi adapter that sends out a signal to the trash people to come collect the trash when it hits a certain weight. And when it hit a certain weight, you can now dispatch somebody accordingly to each and every trash barrel that gets filled up. So now you don't have to wait 5 days to go pick up the trash again. You can just come pick it up the next day. All right. The next one is Philip Emeagwali. The early life of Philip Emeagwali seemed destined for poverty in his native land of Nigeria. He was the oldest of 9 children, and his father, who worked as a nurse's aide, earned only a modest income. As a result, at age 14, Philip was forced to drop out of school because he had shown such great promise in mathematics. His father encouraged him to continue learning at home. Early evening, Philip's father would quiz him in math as well as other subjects. He would ask these questions in rapid fire manner, prompting Philip to think quickly on his feet. Eventually, Philip was tasked to answer 100 questions in an hour, which to his father's delight, he succeeded in. Unable to attend school, Philip instead journeyed to the public library, spending most of the day there. He spent he sped through books appropriate for his age and moved up to college level math material, studying mathematics, chemistry, physics, and English. After a period of study, he applied to take general certificate of education exam. That's considered to be a GED. Having achieved this, having achieved this success, he decided to apply to colleges in Europe and the United States. And at age 17, was offered a scholarship by Oregon State University in the United States. He began his studies at Oregon State in 1974 and received a bachelor's degree in mathematics in 1977. He then moved to the Washington D.C. area and received a master's degree in environmental engineering from George Washington University in 1981, and a second master's degree in applied mathematics from the University of Maryland in 1986. During the same period of time, he received another master's degree from George Washington University, this time in ocean, coastal, and marine engineering. He worked for a period of time as a civil engineer in Maryland and Wyoming, but his real success was yet to come. In 1997, the Emeagwali was accepted to the University of Michigan Civil Engineering doctoral program and received a doctoral fellowship. At the time, in the United States, the government and many in academia contended that there was there were a 20 grand challenges that faced the world in the areas of science and engineering. One of these challenges was petroleum was reservoir simulation. In the petroleum industry, oil is generally found within underground rocks and reservoirs. The oil is extracted by drilling down into the rock and extracting the oil. But because of the uncertainties of locating the pocket of oil, industry experts could only confidently hope to extract 10% of the oil within a known reservoir, and that was done by utilizing supercomputers, which could cost up to $30 million to simulate oil fields and to anticipate the flow of the oil therein. In order to extract the oil, water, or gas must be pumped into the field to force it up. Unfortunately, if done incorrectly, the oil could be forced into an accessible pocket, and then the natural oil flow could be interrupted, thus forcing the oil company to come, commence to drilling again at a considerable expense. And Maguali, having grown up in Nigeria, which boasted grand oil reserves, understood that at that time, with oil selling for $20 a barrel, just 1% increase in production from a 20 billion barrel filled would result in another $400 million yield, a staggering amount. As part of his doctoral dissertation, he decided to take on the challenge. And McGually had read a 1922 science fiction article written by Louis Fry Richardson entitled, quote, Weather Prediction by Numerical Process, which suggested using 64,000 mathematicians do weather forecasting for the entire planet. Based on the article in the work of German mathematician Paul Fillinger and Russian mathematician B.K. Reisenkamp, McGually determined that rather than using a supercomputer that used 8 processors, he would instead use 65,536 microprocessors. A microprocessor is basically what is found in desktop computers to work necessary computations. He based his decision on an old premise that by a large number of chickens, if coordinated in strength and efficiency, will be able to do a better job than a small number of oxen. Thus, his 65,536 microprocessors would work together as chickens and theorized that could outwork the 8 processors. So poorly written, I don't know who wrote this thing. The 8 oxen supercomputer. He originally theorized that the 64,000 processors could be used instead of mathematicians to predict the Earth weather, but then decide to turn his theory towards the petroleum reservoir simulation. The obvious problem was how to gain access to that many computers and how to connect them. Instead, he turned to connection machine, a device developed by a company called Thinking Machines. The machine was designed such that it could contain within it up to 65,536 microprocessors interconnected with each its own RAM and processing 1 bit at a time. McGually found there was a connection machine at the Los Alamos National Laboratory in New Mexico. Scientists were having a difficult time programming the computer to simulate nuclear blasts, and it sat unused for much of that time. He submitted an application, and Nano approved his use of their connection machine, which he accessed remotely through the internet from Michigan. After setting the parameters, McGually ran his program and was astounded when the machine was able to perform 3.1 billion calculations per second. The program had also determined the amount of oil in simulated reservoir, the direction of the flow, and the speed of which it was flowing at each point. The impact of his experiment was immense. By discovering a practical application for utilizing supercomputers, he opened up a whole new market for them. Just 7 years later, it was estimated that 10% of the massively portable computers had been purchased by the petroleum industry. Furthermore, it provided the theory of connecting computers around the world to provide a scalable network through which to share the process of information. Using this concept in conjunction with the existing internet backbone, the World Wide Web would emerge as the new entity for providing communications and enhancing commerce. In 1989, in acknowledgement of his discovery, and McGually was awarded the Institute of Electrical and Electronics Engineers Gordon Bell Prize, which recognizes outstanding achievement in high-performance computing applications. Encouraged by his success and newly founded status, and McGually moved forward with further research and provided new theories and concepts for computer designs. Many of these were based on the idea that computers were simply an extension of the function of nature and thus they should be designed based on nature. One of his theories is aimed at exploring long-term effects of greenhouse gases and global warming. And McGually offered a new design for a computer based on honeycombs. Based on the theory of tessellated models, Macaulay broke the Earth's atmosphere into sections that resembled honeycombs created by bees. He he reasoned that bees are able to use most of the most efficient methods to develop their honeycombs, and that following principles of honeycomb design in a computer will allow it to work on an optimal fashion. He believes that hyperball computer will allow the weather forecasting far into the future and for simulated global warming trends in order to address the problem. In addition, the aforementioned concept, and Maguire has created hundreds more. He has he has lectured around the world and been lauded for his achievements. He was named Pioneer of the Year by National Society of Black Engineers, as well as Scientist of the Year in 1991, the Computer Scientist of the Year by America's National Technical Association in 1993, with dozens of other tributes. For some, for someone who was born with little, Philip and McQuarrie was able to achieve a lot and has served as an inspiration to millions of people, especially in Nigeria. Former United States President Bill Clinton summed up worldwide sentiment by declaring McQuarrie one of the greatest minds of the information age. Amazing man,
So let me be clear. So he created the World Wide Web.
basically.
Oh my gosh, this is crazy. So hold on. He create this is what bugs me out. Number one, okay, you have the engineering background, right? So for somebody to be self-taught, you know, get a GED and then go into a university and get these high-level degrees. What's your thoughts on that?
That's a pretty normal thing. I did the same thing. I got my GED as well. I dropped out of school, got my GED as well, and went on. But he was already gifted at 14, so he was already you know college level at 14 years old. That's very rare.
Mm,
There's very few people that can actually do that, male or female, black or white. He was very gifted, but um, some people are just like that. But the way his father raised him also helped cultivate that sort of mindset.
mm, that's deep. Well,
He's responsible for the public availability of internet access.
mm,
And the other brother we followed up with earlier, um, I forget his name right now. I'll look at the docket again, but he's responsible for fiber optic technology that we use today.
wow. So it seemed like the infrastructure of this this internet and this the digital age was brought on by by black men because it's
Hmm.
like they laid the groundwork.
Hmm.
They laid the groundwork, and I think people it's so crazy, man. There's something simple as a World Wide Web, right?
Hmm.
Everybody uses it. You know, our society depends on it. The whole world depends on it, right? And it's like, right? I don't know, man. It just bugs me out because it's like the recognition. You know, we're looked at upon. They look at us like a certain way, right? But it's like the World Wide Web, man. You know, it's like, come on, and somebody who was self-taught. He's trying to figure something out for oil, this for the petroleum industry, and he came up with that. So it's like it's crazy how you see things spring out uh, of other problems, right? And they're
And
looking for a
he,
solution. Go ahead.
now I was just going to say that, and he actually changed the way computers were designed. So the computer that you have today is because the reason why you have microprocessor improvement is because of this brother.
Yeah, so you kind of understand because a lot of things are explaining in that article as far as the kind of explain what did he basically create as far as the microprocessors and what he just made it more efficient. Like I'm confused on what he
He
did.
he improved upon the design efficiency of it. So before,
Okay.
if you looked at computers before, they were really massive in terms of their design. Just
Hmm.
big white boxes that put out a lot of heat and very inefficient. So his suggestion was that they should be designed in the same way that a honeycomb is designed by a bee, and that's the way they improved upon the microprocessing of the technology behind it. The semiconductor industry improved upon. So you still see that to this very day. If you look at processors from maybe the early late '90s, early 2000s, and look at them today, they're smaller than your thumbnail. Before they were much larger than that. Paul Bryant, what's going on?
Good evening, gents.
What's going on, brother?
Good, good. How are you?
Hey, man. Good, good. Yourself?
Tired, running around, business again all day, but hey, that's the life.
Hmm.
Um, this gentleman here, based on what you're telling me, excuse me, tongue tied. I'm so tired. This gentleman appears to be a genius. If you're
Mm.
14 years old and you're taking college level instruction, that pretty much is the textbook definition of a genius.
Hmm.
Right now, he may not have had the ability to go into formal education or the track of education that would have given him that official title at that age, but clearly he is a genius.
Hmm.
And to talk about honeycomb design, uh, I am no structural engineer.
Hmm.
However, I do know for a fact that any engineer will tell you that the perfect design for any structure in nature is a honeycomb design.
Hmm.
It is absolutely perfect for the redistribution of forces. It's a perfect design.
Mm.
And I just wanted to really quickly, briefly touch. You heard me mention several times about the African American gentleman or black gentleman who worked for Bell Labs, which is now called Lucent Technologies.
Hmm.
And he was responsible for fiber optic technology. And for the life of me, I could not remember his name. Apparently, you guys touched on that earlier this evening.
Yeah, that was we just covered them.
Yeah, I mean, I will go through at my leisure to find. Yeah.
I'm gonna go over it after we finish. Anyways, I just have one more to go over on the
Okay,
docket.
I'm done.
Hmm.
Because I don't want to bore anyone with the technical aspects of how a digital multiplexer works.
Hmm.
That's what allows fiber optic technology to actually work. But
Hmm.
that design, he created it.
Hmm. Thomas Elkins. Thomas Elkins designed a device that helped with the task of preserving perishable foods by way of refrigeration. At the time, the common way of accomplishing this was placing the items in a large container and surrounding them with ice, large blocks of ice. Unfortunately, the ice generally melted very quickly and the food spoiled and the food soon perished. Elkin's device utilized metal cooling coils, which became very cold and would cool down items which they surrounded. The coils were enclosed within a container and perishable items were placed inside. The coils cooled the container to a temperature significantly lower than that inside of a room, thereby keeping the perishable items cool and fresh for longer periods of time. Elkins patented this refrigeration apparatus on November 4th, 1879, and had previously patented a chamber commode in 1872 and dining, ironing table, and quilting frame combined in 1870. And I guess that's a picture of the let's see. Yeah, it's just a picture of the refrigerator.
Again, Like this is just a necessity, right? People can't go without
Hmm.
no refrigerator. So it's like again created by a black man.
Oh yeah.
This is amazing. This is just look at that. Like it's amazing. Like I don't know. I'm speechless at this because it's like um this is something that everybody use on a regular basis every day. You know, and some people have no clue who created this.
Hmm. This really is a patent for a deep freezer, but it's still considered a refrigerator. But
Mm.
for the most part, it another black man saves society.
Yeah.
You
What's
know,
your, what's
it's
your thoughts?
funny.
Oh, go ahead, Mr. Brown. What's your thoughts?
It's funny because if you look up refrigeration, you will see the name Carrier. You see my namesake, Bryant, and
Mm.
you'll see two or three other names. You will not see this gentleman's name mentioned when you look up refrigeration.
Hmm.
Amazing. But it's like with Thomas Edison. Thomas Edison is credited with inventing the light bulb. However, it was one of the scientists who he had working under him, who was a black man, who came up with the idea to place the inside of the bulb under vacuum, and that allowed the filament to stay lit for hundreds of hours as opposed to 15 to 20 minutes. That single, it may seem so simple, but that was the literal creation of the light bulb, placing a vacuum inside the bulb.
Yeah,
But
didn't it say that Edison like failed like wait, how many times it took him to figure it out? Well, he failed like what, 100 times or something like that, or 200 times.
Edison is credited with saying that if I failed 1,000 times, I don't see it that way. I succeeded, I just didn't succeed enough. That's what he's credited for. But
Oh,
Thomas Edison was a thief and a hustler. He was good at stealing other scientists' designs and promoting himself. That's what he was good at.
Hmm.
Because even the electric grid that every nation on this earth has is a copy of the grid that was designed by Nikola Tesla. Because
mm.
Edison was a proponent of DC current for mass electrical generation and distribution. Tesla said, no, 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 no. I found something new. It's called AC, alternating current. But that's an entirely different conversation. My point was anything you see credited to Thomas Edison, look closely because you will find deception and thievery wherever you see the name Thomas Edison.
So he's a con man. And
Yeah, he was.
wait, wasn't that isn't that what it was back then? It was like everybody was like a lot of people were stealing other people's ideas, and putting their face on it. Especially, um, I'm sure there was ideas brought on by other men, especially black men, that was stolen, and they got no credit for. I didn't know that it was a brother that thought the idea of putting that filament under a vacuum. So I didn't even know that. I had no clue about that. So um, I'm noticing this is like like a maybe there's something that happened often. Like back then, it's so easy to do that. Who would they like go to for help if something like that happened? They couldn't sue, or they couldn't go to the news media or anything. Like you know, it's just again, it's like okay, back then, if you were to create something, how do you protect your creation? How do you protect it? Was it running to the patent office?
Who made it to the patent office first? It's really who got the patent in.
Mm.
And there were also plenty of black inventors who they would invent products, and if another person of another ethnicity would come with that patent, the patent office would drag their heels on issuing that black inventor a patent, but yet they would readily issue a patent for the person of another ethnicity. You would also see black inventors who were awarded patents, but people would out and out copy. So that's copyright infringement or patent violation. When they would go to the government looking for redress, the government would not enforce the patent that was given to these black inventors.
Hmm.
Some
Hmm.
other inventors would invent things, and no industrialist would actually manufacture their product. So a lot of black inventors were forced to literally sell their patents to industrial companies who then built them.
Hmm. Paul, I pulled up the brother's profile. Thomas Mensa is the one for, responsible for fiber optic technology improvement.
Mm.
He improved the process.
Oh, oh, okay. Yeah, then he's not the gentleman I was thinking of. Okay.
Mhm.
Yeah, I need to read because this is not the for some reason I cannot remember the guy the individual's name, but
Mhm.
he was American. He worked for Bell Labs, which is now called Lucent Technologies,
Mhm.
and he was instrumental in the fiber optic technology program.
This,
They don't want to give him credit, so they say he was largely instrumental,
yeah,
which is BS.
yeah. This brother worked for Bell Labs in 1986.
Okay, okay.
Hmm.
So he very well may have been on the very same project.
Yeah, let me read this out loud for everybody in the chat. In 1986, Thomas moved on to AT&T Bell Laboratories in Georgia. At Bell, he focused his attention on creating missile systems which utilize fiber optics for their guidance systems. In these systems, a small camera in the nose of a missile delivered images of a target through the fiber optic wires to the pilot, who could then lock onto the target and hit them with extreme accuracy and precision. Dr. Menser and his colleagues developed missiles that could use fiber optic technology while traveling at Mach 1 speed of sound.
Yes, he's not the individual I was thinking of because I'm reading further up.
Mhm.
His expertise was more in the creation of the actual fibers themselves,
Mhm.
which would greatly enhance efficiency. However, no less important of an achievement. I
The
was
other brother I know you're talking about, he's a brown skinned brother with glasses. I can't remember his name right now.
Yes, yes, exactly. Same here.
It's Mark.
Yeah,
It's Mark something.
right, right.
It's gonna bug me all night, so I'm gonna go ahead and go look for it.
Yeah, same here. Yeah, yeah, because his idea was absolutely brilliant. Um, light. If it goes through, light doesn't bend. You can reflect it, you can refract it, but it doesn't bend. However, if you send it through fibers, it bends along the fibers. So if you coat the fibers, then you can put it in any one of 1,000 shapes. So he came up with the idea of the digital multiplexer.
Mhm.
Again, I don't want to bore anyone so much with exactly how it works, but if you transmit data in the form of light, and the multiplexer has a digital clock, okay, so that's how you have your ones and zeros. And I don't want to get too technical,
Mhm.
but his idea was to create the digital clock. He created the digital multiplexer, and that's how fiber optics works.
Mhm.
And he doesn't get the credit. I don't know if he even owns a patent for it. Amazing.
So when it comes to fiber optic technology, is what is like there's less resistance when it comes to transfer of like, information code opposed like going through a wire. It's just less resistance, right? Is that how it works?
Not really. Basically, at its most simple, um, as Mike will tell you, com computers read ones and zeros.
Yes, sir.
Yet, yes or no, on and off binary data. If you send flashes of light, the flashes of light basically act as ones and zeros. So at one end, you are going to have a piece of equipment which reads these ones and these light flashes as ones and zeros, and then it'll translate that into binary data, and then code. So that's the basic function of what fiber optic does. Again, I don't want to get too technical. I don't want to bore anyone, but that's basically what it is.
Here he is right here. Paul Bryant. His name is Mark Dean.
Yes.
You want to go ahead and read that?
Oh, yeah. I'll read it real quick. Um, Computer scientist and engineer Mark Dean is credited with helping develop a number of landmark technologies, including the color PC monitor, the industry standard architecture system bus (ISA), and first gigahertz chip. Born in Jefferson City, Tennessee, 1957, computer scientist and engineer Mark Dean helped develop a computer and landmark technologies for IBM, including the color PC monitor and the first gigahertz chip. He holds three of the company's original nine patents. He also invented the industry standard architecture system bus (ISA) with engineer Dennis Moeller, allowing the computer plugins such as disk drives and printers. Early life education, computer scientist and inventor Mark Dean was born on March 2nd, 1957, Jefferson, Tennessee. Dean is credited with helping launch the personal computer age with work that made machines more accessible and powerful. From an early age, Dean showed a love for building things. As a young boy, Dean constructed a tractor from scratch with the help of his father, supervisor at the Tennessee Valley Authority. Dean also excelled in many different areas, standing out as a gifted athlete and extremely smart student who graduated with straight A's from Jefferson City High School in 1979. He graduated at the top of his class at the University of Tennessee, where he studied engineering. Not long after college, Dean landed a job at IBM, a company who he would become associated with for the duration of his career. As an engineer, Dean proved to be a rising star at the company. Working closely with a colleague, Dennis Muller, Dean developed the new industry standard architecture ISA system bus, a new system that allowed peripherals devices like disk drives, printers, and monitors to be plugged directly into computers. The end result was more efficiency and better integration. But his groundbreaking work didn't stop there. Dean's research at IBM helped change the accessibility and power of the personal computer. His work led to the development of the color PC monitor, and in 1999, Dean led a team of engineers at IBM's Austin, Texas lab to create the first gigahertz chip, a revolutionary piece of technology that is able to do a billion calculations a second. In all, Dean holds three of the company's original nine patents and in total has more than 20 patents associated with his name. Despite his early success, Mark Dean continued to further his education. He earned his master's degree in electrical engineering from Florida Atlantic University in 1982. Then, 10 years later, he completed a doctorate in the field of the same field from Stanford University. While Dean's name isn't quite as well known as other computer pioneers such as Bill Gates and Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs, what a joke. The inventor hasn't gone completely unrecognized. In 1996, he was named an IBM Fellow, the first African American ever to receive the honor. A year later, he was honored with the Black Engineer of the Year President's Award and was inducted into the National Inventors Hall of Fame. In 2001, he was tapped to be a member of the National Academy of Engineers. A lot of kids, quote, a lot of kids are growing up today aren't told that you can be whatever you want to be, Dean said. There may be obstacles, but there are no limits. So,
Mike, this is not the gentleman who I'm thinking of.
are you absolutely sure?
Yeah, because the gentleman who I'm thinking of, he basically spent his entire career at Bell Labs and Lucent Tech. It's the same company, just a different name
Hmm.
after it was spun off. So
That's fine.
this is not
If
him.
you right, if you find him, we'll cover it next week.
Yeah, yeah. Because it's killing me now. I have have to find this guy's name.
With your Mike, with your computer engineering background, right? The stuff that his brother did, like how groundbreaking was it for the stuff he created?
Oh shit! At the time, that was at the height of PC development. The PC
Mm,
was still in its early formation. Because back then there were different models. You had uh, IBM was really the driver behind the standardization of the personal computer, the PC. That's what it stands for.
mm,
And Apple Apple was trying to drive um their own standards with the with Steve Wozniak. And Steve Wozniak was no pushover. That guy, that guy was just as elite, if not better than Mark. Not to put Mark down, but he was top notch himself. So it's funny the article refers to Steve Jobs, but it's really not Steve Jobs. It's really Steve Wozniak that should be given the credit. But you never really hear that because Jobs was the face of the company. But it's incredible because there were so many moving pieces back then. You had many companies. You had Texas Instruments. You had Intel, IBM, HP, AMD at the time. There were various companies involved in NEC from out of Japan. You had
Tandy,
Tan.
Panasonic,
Yep.
General Electric. You had literally 1,000 companies.
Yeah, it was a wild, wild west back then. It was back then what Bitcoin is today. The way how you see all these shit coins and all that stuff popping up,
mm,
it was like that back then with computers.
mm,
Yeah, and no one, when I say no one, the general public, the consumer, nobody knew anything. All you knew was this was the future. That's all you knew.
Mm-hmm.
And there was no graphic user interface. Everything was code, and there were several different languages. And at some point before we got into standardization, you had to learn like five different languages or more, depending on what machine you had. There was no compatibility between products, between programs. It was, like Mike said, it was the wild, wild west back in the early 80s.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and, oh, Paul Brown, back then in the '80s, when this technology and this boom was emerging, like how were people like pouring money into that, like crazy into like investing into it like crazy,
Oh,
or
the PC industry back then was a multi-billion dollar industry.
mm, okay.
Multi-billion dollar industry. Everybody had their hands in something. That's how Michael Dell came out of um that whole entire thing, putting the computers together. That's how Dell got started.
Mm,
Adobe spun off from Apple.
Basically, you have to understand something. There was what was called, all right, before 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 your time, in the early 80s, when VCRs came out, there
Hmm.
was a format war. Which was better, the VCR or the Betamax?
Hmm.
Sony made a superior product with the Betamax, but um, other companies, mostly Panasonic and others, they put more user friendly functionality into their product. So the Betamax was a better product, but the VHS won customer popularity. So Betamax went away. With computers, uh, there was the PC, and there were other, as Mike said, there were other different types. It was the wild wild west. At the
mhm,
end of the day, the quote unquote PC standard went out. So for a while, IBM sat at they were the king of the mountain. But then as prices started to come down, then you saw Dell and you saw every other company come out, and HP and Packard, and so it was a
Compact,
huh?
DEC, yeah,
Right.
digital was really one of the drivers behind IBM as well. It wasn't just IBM, but IBM gets a lot of credit because of the relationship with Microsoft and x86. But DEC was actually one of the bigger players in the game too, with uh, not their supercomputers, but their data center based, their super large computers at the time. Their computers were top notch in comparison to IBM. But that got bought out by Compaq, and then HP bought out Compaq in 2001. So
Mm.
you had Wayne Computer, you had
Right. I forgot about Wang.
yep, you had Wang, you had um, oh man, there was so many. There was just so many of them back then. They were all competing for the same market share, and eventually they all started to wane after a while. There was only so much food on the table that could be eaten.
So seeing that these companies starting to wane, like what determined a company's success and you know and kind of like longevity, like which ones? Cause obviously some certain ones fell apart, right? Fell like came out of it, but what was the determining factor that made like IBM or like Dell hold out? Like what was it?
Whoever got their patent to the market first was the first ones to drive the standard.
Mm,
The reason why IBM survived is because they were early in the process of the design, and they work with Microsoft, so they had an application which was the operating system itself, and then the apps just came after that. Um, all they had to do was provide the hardware, but then and then you had Intel come, and well, Intel was already there, but Intel helped drive a lot of the standards as well, such as PCI and USB and things of that nature. So DEC was responsible for the network connectivity.
Like basically what we now know as PCs, the personal computer, at one time they're basically called IBM clones, right? So basically, the world now is more or less for the general market. Mike, correct me if I'm wrong. For the general consumer market,
Mm-hmm.
there's either Macs, which are Apple, or PCs. And at the end of the day, what we now call PCs are IBM clones. There were 1,000 different types and styles of computers. The IBM style gained sway. It was like a perfect storm of a good product, good software, good processor. IBM. They were also a member of the Dow 30, so they
Mm-hmm.
were they were the biggest whale out there. They had the most amount of money to throw towards R&D and marketing.
Mm-hmm.
So that perfect storm helped them win the war. So there was no one thing that led to IBM winning that war. But I'll say this: they're no longer the king of the mountain, IBM.
Mm-hmm.
So now, while all computers now are basically PCs, basically an IBM clone, a clone of that IBM style computer, they're nowhere near number one in that market anymore.
Yeah, they got out of the PC business quite some time back, but for the most part, they helped drive the market to where it is today. Um, and there was a lot of black people involved in that. You don't really get they don't really get any credit. But if you ever go to like I said before, I think if you go to Micro Center and look in the rafters, there's these banners in the rafters that show all the people who helped drive the industry to where it is today, going all the way back to the '60s.
So, something I've always been curious about. Uh, Gordon Moore and his team at Intel,
Mm-hmm.
because
Once in a while.
every picture I've ever seen, I haven't seen a single black face over at Intel back
I don't,
in the
yeah,
60s
I
and
don't think black people came over to Intel until after the 80s. Um, Now for IBM had black people working at IBM back during the 1950s, right after World War II. So because of integration, they started hiring black men. And one of the reasons why they would hire black men, or they would hire men, period, was because back then the notion was that a man who was married had to take care of his family, so he was least likely to leave, and black men were more reliable at the time
That's interesting. I didn't know that.
because black people had a higher marriage rate than white people did.
Hmm.
that's funny. That's funny. The U.S. the U.S. military tends to have the same mindset. Once you're an officer, past a certain level, they only want married officers because you're more dependable, you're more reliable, because
Mm-hmm.
you're of the mindset that you have something to take care of, something to fight for. Like
Mm-hmm.
there's a certain level of maturity and stability there.
It's also a sense of responsibility. If you can manage your family, you can manage your team.
Right.
So they tend to get more accolades. But yeah, the industry was really wild back then, but it started to die down in the 90s. And you still have things changing in terms of like um, formats on the computer, but not as much as it was before. I mean, we had like three different versions of ISA, and then they went into PCI, and then we went from serial bus to universal serial bus from parallel to USB. Um, to from 56K to baud modems to high speed local area networks. Though I think we're done with the changes now for the most part.
Hmm.
But back then, man, if you had a degree in STEM, you were guaranteed a job. The
Hmm.
companies paid big money back then. People made a lot of money back then in terms of working for IBM and Texas Instruments and all these other companies in the IT industry. Oh, I shouldn't say the IT industry, but the PC industry. They made big bucks back then. So that's why it was very common to just go out and get a. If you got a degree, you went out and got a job. You really didn't. You didn't. The idea of an entrepreneur was unheard of. You didn't really invent. Well, you didn't. Not that so much you didn't invent, but you didn't go start up a alternative company. That was just unheard of. Business people did that, right? Your people who from Wall Street and whatnot, yeah, they started companies, but not in the tech industry. There was if there was somebody to work for, you went to work for IBM. You took pride in working for IBM. Everybody wanted to work for IBM.
You know, Jack, Mike talked about Steve Jobs always got the acolytes, but he really wasn't the driving force behind the company. It was Woz, and he's right because it was Wozniak. Wozniak was the real brilliance at Apple. Steve Jobs was a hardware guy. He was a conceptual guy. This should look like this, or we should have a graphical user interface, or
He was,
you know, so it was along those lines. That was Steve Jobs' brilliance. He was a good businessman, and he was a great marketer, and he sold himself, and he created, that whole Apple experience and that Apple look and those Apple developer conference meetings. At the end of the day, that's all marketing. It's all hype, and that was his strength.
he was actually a software developer. Well, not a software developer. He was a programmer. He programmed in C.
Okay.
Yeah, he programmed in Cobalt and C, but he never really a hardware person. He understood how to drive the hardware with software, but he didn't have he was no Bill Gates. Bill Gates was a programmer to the T.
Right.
Steve Jobs was more of a guy who wrote script.
Mm. But I know once he came back to Apple
Hmm.
and he forced Woz out of the company, he did turn things around.
Hmm.
But again, was it because he was a good tech person, or was it because he was just a good businessman? Because those those two are not necessarily the same thing.
Hmm. Now, I don't know how much you've heard from the Hangout, Paul. Do you have anybody in particular that I've read off that you have any interest in, or?
When I logged on, I literally jumped on.
Okay.
I missed basically the entire hangout.
Hmm. All right.
Yeah, so I'll have to
Let me
at my leisure
let
go
me
in.
let me ask, let me ask you a question. On Paul Bryant. The seeing that, just your thoughts, man. Seeing the productivity of these gentlemen back then,
Mm.
right? Less resources, um, less support, as far as society as a whole, right? And they were faced with so much adversity. They created so many patents. They changed society, right? They make things better, especially these black men. What's your thoughts, man? Because I look at things now. You're more of an older gentleman, so I look at things now as like, especially like the younger generation is not as productive as these men, right? There's not enough. I don't think they give a lot of support for gentlemen like of these likes like that go hard and you know produce like this, and create things that change the world. I think they give people who really don't do anything, who's unproductive, more respect, and more accolades than anything. So, what do you think would be a solution to, as far as young people, to get them, on this wavelength, to make a difference, like what these brothers did?
Well, first off, the real that's really two different topics. So I'll start with the first, and you have to understand something. I know it's easy to say that, oh well, you see how creative black people were, and they were doing this and they were doing that. Well, at the risk of offending people, let's slow down and pump the brakes. We're talking about literally a handful of individual inventors, not everyone as a whole. All right. Everyone as a whole is going about their daily lives and doing their daily thing. So we're not talking about what black people did. We're talking about what a handful of black inventors did. Now, before things get off the rails, what I'm trying to say is what I feel, my opinion, the the example of those few engineers and inventors and scientists that should have been celebrated, that should have been talked about. There should have been engineering schools and design schools opened under the guidance, the leadership and guidance of these individuals, devoted to these individuals. Instead of seeing instead of seeing what we have seen over the decades, we're not seeing engineering schools and design schools and tech schools for young black youth to go into. All right, young most young black youth see, oh, I want to be a rapper, or I want to work on my jump shot, or I want to work on my baseball swing. All right, no one wants to be an engineer, a designer, a coder, an inventor, a scientist. Okay, so now which segues into the second part of your question. Now we're talking about cultural and societal change as a whole for black people here in America. And that is a topic I tend to have some rather extreme views myself. So I think I'm going to step back and maybe let Mike express his thoughts.
Oh, my thoughts kind of coincide with yours. I I went to a trade school, a technical school, for computer electronics. That's how I got into computer engineering, and then I switched into IT and finished up with that. But yeah, you're right. You don't. Most of those schools don't. Community colleges aren't teaching that at all. For whatever reason, there's very few community colleges in predominantly black areas that actually teach that, and a lot of your trade schools are gone. Uh, they just did not have the funding. They couldn't survive, the dot-com burst back then, and it didn't survive 2008 either. Most of those schools just went belly up. Not enough enrollment, not enough financial support from the government. They all died out for the most part. So I think there is a gap in academia, but this it's a two-part system, right? So one, you don't have the brick and mortar institutions that you used to have back in the 60s and 70s, and you also have a literacy gap because of poor education for black males in a lot of these public school systems. So there has to be addressed on both ends of the spectrum. National Society of Black Engineers does a very good job at um, guiding of their pre-K program. So that involves kindergarten all the way up to 12th grade of high school of a track, an academic track, and a mentorship track to help guide them from kindergarten all the way up until they graduate high school, all the way until they get into college, and then after that as well, and then landing them into higher positions. Most people who are involved in NISB actually are very successful. Very few people who are in NISB are unemployed and sitting on their mom's couch not doing anything. Um, so there has to be those those two ends of the spectrum have to be fixed. The literacy issue, and then the brick and mortar issue of access to easy education, easy levels of education.
If you look at engineering here in the United States of America, uh, engineers are complaining that from civil engineering to um, me- mechanical engineering to computer sciences to theoretical physics, they're saying the vast majority, depending on who you talk to, anywhere from 70% to 94% of all engineering enrolled students and degrees at universities and colleges in the United States of America are foreign born, and they're mostly coming from Asia and India. Okay, so why is it that American youth are not looking to go into the sciences, engineering and science and the related fields, right? So, as as Mike said, as there needs to be that track. Okay, I love sports. I love football. I love racing. I love baseball. But why is it you can go to any and listen? My focus right now is on black people. I don't bash anyone because I don't care to, but my focus is black people. So why is it that black youth can go to a park, they can go to a recreation center, but they have no exposure to classical music, no exposure to the sciences, no exposure to computer networking, to coding, to science. Okay, you look at a black youth between 7 to 12, they can quote you rap lyrics, they can quote you sports stats, they can tell you about the nonsense and the fuckery, excuse that term, but ask ask them about Gordon Moore, ask them about Turing, um, the Turing test, ask them about these black black gentlemen's contribution to the sciences and computing, and they'll look at you like, "What the hell are you talking about?" Okay, so those things absolutely have to change. All right. I'm of the firm belief in you have to take concrete action. Okay, it's all good and well to be upset. It's all good and well to march and yell and protest and to have a chip on your shoulder, hey, fine, God bless. But while you're doing that, how about actually doing something concrete as sending sending black youth to programs of this nature? Okay, Mike speaks about NISBE. There are other forms. I send my daughter to the prep program. So there are these programs out there. The problem is they're so far and few in between. All right. We both live in the Northeast. As you move away from the Northeast and the West Coast, the opportunities are extremely, extremely sparse. Okay, so that needs to change. So you're asking me, what needs to change. It's monumental, yes, but there are concrete things that actually can be done. So wherever the funding is, however the funding can be raised, I'm of the firm belief that we don't need as many parks and recreation centers in black neighborhoods as we do trade schools and computing schools and engineering schools and musical programs and art programs, because I refuse to believe that because you are of a certain ethnicity that you have to do this or you are excluded from doing that based solely for no other reason on your ethnicity. To me, that's total BS.
Yeah, and to Paul's point, a lot of those those basketball courts in your neighborhood, those football fields, those things cost hundreds of thousands of dollars from taxpayers um that are spent on it, and they're underutilized. It's a shame that the people of those neighborhoods are being robbed of their hard-earned taxes to be spent on things that are not very that don't have a return on investment that's necessary. You spent more of that money on computer engineering programs at the grade school level. You would see a huge difference in a matter of 12 months. I mean, literally 12 months. That's all it takes. Even a presidential cycle would actually churn out better talent in your neighborhood, which increases the value of the neighborhood, which increases the the wealth of the neighborhood itself. Because those same children that grow up in that sort of culture are going to are going to have better talents later on. The ability to write code, the ability to solder, the ability to use these Raspberry Pis and things of that nature, and invent autonomous vehicles and uh, things of that nature, artificial intelligence. But you need programs to actually back it, and unfortunately, those tax dollars are being siphoned right out of the community into programs that, I mean, into applications that don't really matter. We don't need any more athletes. There's only 600 slots in the NBA. You got a neighborhood of 100,000 people, 600 slots in the NBA to fulfill. It's a losing proposition going in. You'd be much better off cranking out 600 doctors or 600 computer engineers for your neighborhood. It just makes more sense. But there's a variant of reasons as to why this is happening. But for the most part, black people have to beat the drum for it.
You've heard me consistently say that black people in America have two viable case studies: Japan and Germany. Both nations were literally bombed to dust and rubble. In less than 40 years, both nations turned themselves into top five most powerful economies on earth. Japan has waned since '89. Japanese recession. Germany has not. Germany basically now economically controls Europe through through the strength of their economy. But I digress. Now, you can look at Germans are the best engineers in the world. They have the best engineering colleges in the world. People travel around the world to go to German engineering colleges. Their society is geared around apprenticeship from an early age. So from what we would call in this country junior high school age, You pick a trade, whether that's being an auto mechanic or an IT person, right? You then go to apprenticeship. You work under tutelage in that field, and that continues through the rest of your junior high school years into high school, through college, and then you go to look for a job. That's ingrained into German culture, right? I've spoken how the Japanese approach business. Okay, so those are two case studies for what those two nations, what those two societies did to rebuild from scratch. Now, granted, both had a huge advantage in the fact that they already had an actual nation. A lot of people in America do not have an actual nation per se, because we're part of a community within this nation. However, those are two viable case studies, okay, for being focused and committed to several goals, multiple goals to bring about certain results. And you don't need monolithic thought and group think to bring that about, but you have to be about positivity and productivity. All right. So, as Mike said, the hundreds of thousands of dollars or $1 million spent a new on a new park, or $3 or $4 million spent renovating or rebuilding a rec center, right? That can easily go towards building a trade school
Hmm.
or building a tech school. That money can easily spend towards creating a program to go into a public school to identify the best and brightest and do exactly what I just talked about as far as apprenticeship program. Uh, when I was young, I don't know, 10, 11, my mom enrolled me in a program in the school that I went to. So a person from a particular field would take us kids, and we were that person's mentors for 6 months. We went to their job. We saw how the industry worked. We saw how the field worked. Um, one year we worked for the producer of the David Letterman show, and we learned how the studio works, how the equipment works. We had to create our own news program. uh, the next year or the next semester, it was a science program. These are viable programs that can work in black schools.
Hmm.
Uh, my mother sent me to a predominantly white school in a white neighborhood. There's no reason why these programs cannot also exist for black students in black schools. All right, so it's all about the focus. Is your focus going to be Real Housewives of Atlanta and that nonsense, or having 25 pairs of Jordans, or trying to make sure that your children and your children's friends are enrolled in programs that are going to lead the way toward the future? Instead of everyone being afraid of automation, how about going into the tech field, or going into the IT field, or going into the technology manufacturing field? All right, so you can ensure you will have a piece of that pie, whether it whether it's from being employed in the field, building things, creating things, coding things, potentially becoming an entrepreneur. Okay, but see, from what I see, I don't see black people talking like that or even thinking like that. I see them getting scared. Oh, automation is going to take our jobs and we're going to be running around mindless and poor. You know what? Everything in this world is about perspective. It's all about perspective. So, where you see fear and something to be loathed and dreaded, I see an opportunity. But again, that's perspective.
Hmm.
So, I'm sorry, rant over.
Yeah, and a lot of what we're saying can actually be done through public libraries. Most of our libraries have been revamped in the last 10 years or so, so they're pretty advanced, and there are a lot of programs inside there that focus on like introduction to social media, introduction to Facebook, introduction to um, um, word applications and things like that. There's literacy programs in place, but there's nothing to actually touch on next generation emerging markets. So that's where we need to really place our money into. And instead of sending them to these expensive colleges, we need to bring that level of education back to the public libraries and then allow them to get their education there for free that we've already spent our tax dollars on. And then they can walk away with certified, accredited um, levels of education without breaking our wallet and without sending these people into debt, as well as driving that or delivering that sort of that level of knowledge to the people, because that's what those institutions are there for, so that they can have access to levels of literacy. And we haven't really you know it's installed a better system in place. But that's stuff that I've been working on for for a few months now. I should have something in place by next year. But um, yeah, that's where it needs to start. I mean, first get these kids a library card, and then number two, you got to start picking their brain and figure out what they're really good at. Looking at all these articles, all these autobiographies, a lot of these guys who were involved in inventing things and have all these patents. The number one thing that I've noticed about all of them, all of these brothers, is that they always work with their hands. They're always tinkering with something. That's how they got started. Lonnie Johnson blew up his mother's kitchen, trying to invent a robot or something to that effect. Um, and then that brought him into higher levels of education, scholarships, and all that. So that's where that needs to start it, in my opinion.
And I I agree. I agree 1,000%. And also, something that from from my experience, what seems to be a taboo topic amongst a lot of black people, exposure to other cultures. I do not understand the refusal of exposure to other cultures, because when you do not expose your children to other cultures, you are you are you are ingraining isolation into them, and you don't even realize it, to the point where it's us against them. This is white stuff and this is black stuff, and that's the way it has to be. It has to be separated. And that is a failure. That is a recipe for failure. It really is. It's a recipe for failure. Okay, maybe if you know Japan is one of the most isolationist, insular nations in the world, but until '89, they were one of the five most powerful economies on earth. Now they're like, you know, number eight or number nine, but still, they're still top 10. And they're very insulationist and very insular. Okay. So I get that. But unless, unless you're at the point where you have the ability to thumb your nose at other cultures and societies, to do so, to me, is a recipe for failure. Okay. So I'm not saying that I'm not saying that you necessarily have to follow the track that my mother did, sending me to white schools in a white neighborhood. But there's no reason. Where does it say that because you're black, and so because your children are black, they can't watch public television, they can't have an exposure to fine arts, to literature, to classical music, to appreciating other cultures and other nations? Why does a family trip have to be going down to Florida for the summer? What's wrong with a trip to France for the summer? Okay, so, and reading and books. I whether it was natural or it was fostered by my mom, who herself was a teacher in West Indies before she came to this country when she was 26. you know, Reading. Everything was about reading, reading, reading. So once you have that love of reading from an early age, you naturally want to explore things. So whether you become a scientist or you go into any other form of endeavor. I believe that our black kids need to have as much exposure to as many possibilities as they can. To limit that exposure and to limit those possibilities is a recipe for failure. Because then you have what you have now, people standing around saying, "Oh, what's going on? I can't believe we're in this situation. What needs to change?" Now, listen, we're all well aware that there are outside in influences and things that have happened and things that do happen. Granted, but by the very same token, when you literally have the ability with your two hands to reach out and make things change and happen for yourself, but you willingly choose not to, what does that say about you? And what does that say about you limiting the future chances of success for your children? Gentlemen?
Yeah, there needs to be a definitely a campaign, for STEM. NISB does a lot of that around the country. So each region, they there's campaigns multiple times a year. If you're a part of NISB, you'll get those emails that come in. You can also look on eventbrite.com or download the app Eventbrite, and that should tell you exactly what's going on in terms of those sort of campaigns. But yeah, this is where black people need to start investing into startups and accelerators and incubators that lead to more more entrepreneurship in the black community, because brothers like Lonnie Johnson, brothers like the brother from Nigeria, Philip Mcguali, and all the rest of those guys who came before us, they would have had um, their own companies where they could hire black people had there been some form of investment put back into them. I mean, you have all these ball players and entertainers who spend millions of dollars on Bugattis and everything else, but don't put anything back in the hood. But if you look at the history of some of the people that we covered tonight in last week, um, the people who had the money through their inventions and their their perseverance, they actually went back and helped a lot of poor black people and things of that nature. So it wasn't like they just got their money and lived with white people, but they actually went back and helped black people at the same time of being
Hey, hey,
uh
hey, 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 hey.
what happened?
Jokes, just jokes, just jokes.
Okay, yeah, they actually went back and helped those people, and they didn't have to say they were pro black or anything like that. They just actually did what they were supposed to do. And you need the platforms. I think NISV is a great platform, but I also think that there has to be more done. I've spoken about this highly last year at NISV's regional conference, that we need to invest more. Having people show up and toast glasses together, that's fine. But what happens when everybody goes home? How do we network with each other beyond the conferences and beyond the meetups? There has to be more money invested into the startup sector and actually cultivating more entrepreneurship amongst black youth and black people.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing, personally, I don't necessarily, well, you know what? I'll leave it alone because then it kind of creates a whole other conversation. So,
Hmm.
but
Yeah,
yeah,
I have one more group of people to actually cover next week, and then we'll be done for the month. But I think that this is a learning thing for me, because there's a lot of things I just didn't know. A lot of these people that we're covering, I did not know about them. Quite only a couple of them, like Lonnie Johnson and the the more marketable people there. I've heard about them, but all these other people from the 1700s and 1800s, I didn't know anything about them. I still haven't learned about them in school. So
and you won't, you won't. What I learned in school I learned in school that Martin Luther King was good,
Mhm.
Malcolm X was bad,
Mhm.
Crispus Attucks led a slave revolt, and Black History Month is February. Boom. That's it. That's everything that I learned in school. Everything I learned, I had to learn on my own.
Mhm.
So hey, it is what it is. I don't make mention of that or to say that to cry and complain about anything. I make mention of it. My point is educate yourself. That should be every person's goal. You must educate yourself. There is too much of a reliance upon being told everything, upon being given everything, and that everything that you're told is the absolute rote fact, and that somehow if someone is putting garbage on a plate in front of you, it's up to you to sift through the garbage to try to find the jewels. And people convince themselves that that's what it is. Never once stopping to think that if someone's putting garbage in front of you on your table, that should make you stop and think that maybe it's all garbage. Okay, so, but again, that's societal and that's human nature in general, and the majority is the human nature is to tend towards comfort. So it's more comfortable to be patted on the head and told what to think than to actually think. So I'll leave that alone.
Yeah. My Jack, you have any closing thoughts? Okay. My closing thought is that if you all want any, I'm offering IT mentorship. So if you are looking for IT mentorship in negotiating salaries, direction, certifications, um, situational awareness, I am offering free one-on-one mentorship. Drop your email in the chat or after this video, and or email the Black Brain Trust, and I will actually respond back, and we can schedule a time. But for right now, we are out.